What's up, everybody? It is day 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft. Last night, 31 young men had their dreams come true. Tonight, that trend will continue as more names get called out and their dreams come true of joining the Professional Football League in the NFL. I am joined again by the legend, senior NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Network, Tony Pauline. And today we have a special guest to join us. He is an NFL draft analyst and the host of Audibles and Analytics podcast. That is Jon Ledyard. What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing well, man. Awesome to be on here with both of you. Two legends in my mind here for day 2 and round 2, especially the NFL draft. It's going to be a lot of fun today.
Yeah, it's good to be back. I don't know if it's good to be back with Brett, but it's good to be back. And I think the only legend can be seen behind me on that poster. That's the only legend that's on the screen right now.
Yeah, well, look, we're going to have a lot of fun. Look, before we get started, I just want to point out, if you're watching us and there's already a bunch of you with us right now, make sure you like and subscribe to our channel. Click that bell icon that you see there in YouTube. Make sure you get notified every time we update new content to the channel. Make sure you do that now. Also, remember, this is a fully fan interactive live stream. We are going to be taking your questions, your reactions, and your comments live as the picks come in. We'll be putting them up on the screen. We want to involve you in the conversation. So make sure you're active in that chat room so you can be a part of the show with us. That's what we're here for. It's going to be a lot of fun. We were here last night, Tony, and our good buddy who does the Football Insider show with us throughout the entire NFL season, Trey Wingo, Pro Football Network senior NFL analyst. And he coined the term during his first appearance with us of the 2 that he made. We are now officially on #WillWatch once we got past pick 19. Well, we're now about to get the first pick of the second round, pick number 32, and Will Watch continues. Tony, let's start with you. What's the latest on Will Levis, and is it expected, should we have expected, that he would slide into round 2?
I think expecting that he was going to fall out of the first round is a bit of a reach, but the fact is this. I mean, Levis is the 37th rated player on my big board. He was my number 5 quarterback. Go back to Pro Football Network's coverage of the Shrine game. When I was in Vegas, I was reporting that a lot of scouts, a lot of people who were there in the league were not very high on Levis. They said they wouldn't take him in the top 20 picks. He's much more of a thrower than a passer. He made a lot of mistakes in the lead up to the draft. He didn't play in the Senior Bowl, which is a major issue. You know, we talked about the combine workout and the fact that he's more concerned about throwing the ball 85 yards down the field than showing off his big biceps and proving that he is a passer. That has been a concern throughout the process, and a lot of people were very upset that he was not at the Senior Bowl. I mean, this kind of parallels what we saw with Geno Smith all those years ago.
John, look, you know, you've been watching the draft from afar. You're a big draft enthusiast. What were your thoughts about Will Levis heading into this weekend and now knowing that we're going to have to wait till at least round 2 before his name gets called?
Yeah, QB4 for me. So I guess it wasn't totally shocking to see him slide a little bit, but out of the first round completely, that surprised me. I didn't have a first round grade on him though, so I certainly understand where some of the concerns are. For me, when I watch him, I think here's a guy that definitely has a lot of tools, but at the end of the day, like what teams are hoping to get out of a guy with his skill set is a playmaker, right? Somebody who creates outside of structure, creates under pressure, can do the extra things, right? The things we know Richardson can do, but it's the little things we need to see Richardson do better or get opportunities to do better because his offensive floor didn't ask him to do that. Well, Levis, I think he can do some of those little things well, but the problem is there really isn't a creator there. Like people like to compare him to Josh Allen and these other types of quarterbacks. He doesn't really play that way. That's not really the style of play that he has found to be really successful. You don't see a ton of highlight reel bombs from Will Levis on tape. So I think in addition to what Tony's saying, the concerns he's talking about, I definitely think there's also a little bit of a play style. Like, can this guy ever be more than a point and shoot quarterback? Can he actually be a playmaker at the position?
All those questions are what he's going to have to answer. And as we said at the top of last night's show, right as round 1 kicked off, this is the beginning of the journey for these prospects. We're going to grade, we're going to give our analysis, but it's going to be a couple of years before we know truly how these players turn out. Whether or not that means Will Levis will be successful remains to be seen. but for whatever reasons, he has slid to at least round 2. I bring this up because the Pittsburgh Steelers are now officially on the clock to kick off round 2 of the 2023 NFL Draft. When that pick comes in, we will officially announce it probably before the broadcast, and that'll be the case throughout the entire evening. So make sure you stay with us to get the picks first and get instant analysis. Now, Tony, as we wait for this pick to come in, anything you're hearing about what the Steelers could be thinking, or if other teams are looking to get into this pick, what those teams could be looking to do?
A lot of teams looking to trade up. The Atlanta Falcons, Washington Commanders, Las Vegas Raiders, Tennessee Titans. All want to move up to get the quarterback. I had reported earlier that I heard that Tennessee wanted Will Levis. Now I hear they're leaning towards Hendon Hooker. I've reported on Pro Football Network more than a week ago, Las Vegas Raiders like Hendon Hooker. There was talk. I know that, as I reported earlier today, they tried to trade to the back end of round 1 last night. There was no mention of who the player was. My information a week ago, it was Hendon Hooker. So I think this is a situation where Pittsburgh is going to be on the clock till the very end. They're going to try and move this selection. It's a matter of how far down do they want to move. Are they willing to miss out on a few of their potentially coveted prospects at the top of round 2?
Yeah, I think we have at least 5 teams that are interested, I believe, in going to this pick. So there's going to be action for it. Pittsburgh's asking for a high price from all the reports out there. If they stay, Albert Breer's indicated this in reports. And also, I think we've all put this together a little bit that Joey Porter Jr. would probably be one of the top targets if they do stay at that pick.
Yeah, we'll have to see, sort of what happens. Now, look, as Pittsburgh takes enough time on the clock, you have to imagine that they're on the phone with several teams. If they get an offer they like, they'll obviously pull the trigger. John, I know you follow the Steelers pretty closely in particular. If they do keep this pick, you mentioned Joey Porter Jr. As an obvious, kind of selection there. Obviously, there's the history with his family and the Pittsburgh Steelers. But who else could they be looking at if they are to stay at pick 32?
Yeah, I mean, I think that he'd probably be the pick if they were going to stay there. But I would guess, some of the corners, that's going to be where they're looking at this point in the draft. That would have been the choice if there wasn't a tackle on the board in the first round for them, I think. And so they'll look at Tyreek Stevenson. That's another player that fits kind of what they're looking for. Physical, competitive types of corners. And so it's possible Keely Ringo would be somebody that they would look at as well, although I'm not quite as high on him as maybe some other people are. I don't know that they'll see Brian Branch the way that a lot of draft evaluators, at least on here, on Twitter and things, tend to, because of the struggle with Branch, I think, is figuring out how he fits in the NFL. Like, it's a good college player. We know that. What's his role in the NFL? Where can he play full-time in the NFL that he gives us peak value? And so I don't know that they go that direction. I know some Steelers fans are interested in that. Later in this first round, I don't know if it would be here, but if they trade, or later in the second round, if they traded down, John Michael Schmitz, the Minnesota center, could be in the cards for them, and also maybe a linebacker like Trenton Simpson. I think they really had their eye on Jack Campbell, didn't expect him to go as high as he did. And
none of us did.
None of us did. And so they'll look at linebacker in this range of the draft too.
All right, look, again, we're waiting for this pick to either be traded or to come in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. While we wait, I want to give a big shout out to a lot of the people who are watching us right now on YouTube. A day one audience member for us, Tony, in Jean-Paul Edward de Dios. After 3 years, you'd think I'd get that a little bit cleaner, but we'll see. Also, they're letting us know they think Arizona needs to trade down from where they are. Johnny Vang says, what's up? He's ready for day 2. Also asked some pretty good questions. So let's ask that question while we wait for this pick to come in. Tony, you and I mentioned last night that we really loved, and I think everybody did, what Howie Roseman and the Eagles did in the draft last night. But I would like to get both of your thoughts. What was your favorite, or what did you give the biggest winner coming in round 1? Tony, let's start with you.
I thought the Giants did a good job. I mean, the Giants wanted a big outside corner. They moved up one spot. They gave away a late round pick. They got Deontay Banks. Obviously, the Eagles, the Cardinals, I thought did an outstanding job. They moved down. They pick up a lot of draft capital. They move back up, and they get the left tackle that I had said in my mock draft anyway that they wanted in Paris Johnson Jr. You want to make Kyler Murray a more productive quarterback. You've got to protect him. I like what those teams do. There were a lot of I want to say questionable picks, especially on the defensive side of the board. You look at the Jets. Detroit, I think, drafted some guys that they like, good players, but earlier than anyone thought they were going to go.
John, what are your thoughts? Who was the biggest winner for you coming out of round one last night?
Well, I think the Eagles and Seahawks are getting a lot of praise right now, and rightfully so. Those are two. I mean, whenever you have a two-person draft haul on round one, you tend to get the winner nod. But also, when you nail both of those picks, that helps a lot too. So, phenomenal job by both those teams. Everybody's talked about them, so I'll just go outside of the box a little bit. I think the Titans, at 11, just the least sexy pick of the first round, probably Peter Skoronski just staying there and taking him. They didn't have to move, and I think they got the best offensive lineman in the draft, and they need it. I mean, that offensive line needs completely rebuilt at this point. They are kind of doing that with a lot of parts of their roster. So to start with a guy who I feel like it's just a really safe pick, even if he's not a tackle, and for me, probably isn't, and I don't know that for Tennessee will be, but maybe they try him there, even if he isn't. I mean, he is a very Joe Tooney-like in terms of being able to go inside, play there if you need him to, technically sound, can start right away, can be a leader for you. In this draft, I don't see a lot of top type prospect that are also sure things, and he's both to me. And so I love the fact that they just stayed there and got it at 11.
Any big surprises for you, John, from last night? You mentioned Jack Campbell going to the Lions at 18. That seemed to be a big surprise for all of us. Tony and I talked a lot about the Steelers moving up to 14 and ostensibly catching the Jets flat-footed. They took Will McDonald. What are the thoughts from you on that as well?
Yeah, so I think big surprises, there weren't a ton, to be honest. There weren't big reaches, let's say. The Gruden Mayock days are over. We don't have the guys that are way down the consensus board that are getting elected there. So now we've got to look at, Mozzie Smith, I think, was 49 on the consensus board that's out there, and he was the furthest player down that board that was picked in the first round. I actually mocked that one, so that wasn't a surprise to me. But I think Emmanuel Ford coming off the board to Washington with Christian Gonzalez on the board, that one shocked me a little bit. I'm a big fan of Forbes' game. I thought Gonzalez would go there. So that one was a surprise to me. And I think McDonald to the Jets, it's just a good fit. I don't know how much of a role he's going to play this season. Long-term, the role probably expands. This year, they're trying to compete, and I think he can help them do that just with the pass rush skill set that he has. The big rotations from Robert Saleh, always on that defensive line. He'll definitely aid their team in that way, I think.
Well, speaking of surprises, just to continue this a little bit, I don't think it was a surprise that we saw a running back in Bijan Robinson go in the top 10. Yes, he's a running back, but a lot of teams had him as the best offensive weapon in this draft. But then the Lions took Gibbs at 12 after a trade down. And now there are reports saying they were comfortable taking him up at 6 had they stayed there. Tony, let's start with you. Are the running backs making a comeback in terms of value in the NFL?
Well, they've always been valued in the NFL. It's just that they're devalued in the draft. I don't know if the Lions, or if that's really a genuine, we would have taken him at 6. The Lions wanted Devin Witherspoon at 6. And when he was gone, when Seattle selected him with the 5th pick, they were looking to get out. Both of these players are outstanding prospects. Bijan Robinson was my 3rd-rated prospect in the draft. Jahmyr Gibbs, a little bit smaller, different player. I still had a first-round grade on him. I think that if you've got a good player there at any position except for maybe punter or kicker, you're going to take them regardless of the position. Will this be the trend moving forward? Will there be more running backs selected in the first round than in the past? We'll wait and see. I'm not going to jump out on a limb and say, this is the shape of things to come. I just think that in Bijan Robinson, he was a tremendous prospect. And Jahmyr Gibbs, he was also a really good running back.
John, the Steelers took Najee Harris in the first round a couple of years ago. Been a serviceable running back, but not the dynamic playmaker I think a lot of people were expecting. Any fear that the Lions could be making a similar mistake by taking Gibbs all the way up at pick 12?
Well, they got a very dynamic player for sure. I think the explosiveness that Harris doesn't have. Harris has a lot of things, and he's a good player for sure. Was he worth the first-round pick? I didn't think at the time, and I don't think now, but he's definitely a good player who will help your team and your locker room. With Gibbs, I think that there's the explosive element for sure, and you have to basically be banking on that full bore if you're the Lions. That he's going to create 25 splash plays for you this season as a rookie, and that's going to lead to a victory or two that you wouldn't get without him. And they obviously wish Swift was that guy. If you watch Hard Knocks, it was clear Deuce Staley wasn't a huge fan of his. And then I think also as time went on, the injuries just started to pile up with him as well. So he's probably going to get traded here in the very near future, perhaps even tonight. And so that opens up the door for somebody like Gibbs, who is very, very talented and hopefully can stay on the field and help them in that way. Now, would I have made this pick? Absolutely not. And I would have tried to trade back again before I did it. At least they did trade back before they did it the first time. They do deserve some props for that. And I don't think they got a bad football player. Like, this is a player that can help them. But I do think at the same time that there's that to consider.
Well, John, let's make a quick jump here because the pick is in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They finally made the pick and they held on to it. And with the 32nd pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers are selecting cornerback Joey Porter Jr., the cornerback out of Penn State. He's the 21st overall player on the PFN consensus big board, comes in at 6'2", 196 pounds. He's got NFL lineage, guys. He is one of the top cornerbacks in this draft. A lot of people thought he could go round one. Tony, let's go to you first. What's your initial reaction to this pick being made by the Pittsburgh Steelers at the top of round two?
I'm sure they didn't get what they wanted in return for moving down. And like I said, it was a question of how far were they willing to move down and possibly lose out on one of the players that they coveted. And that player obviously was Joey Porter Jr. I mean, they've got to be ecstatic. A lot of people thought they could take Porter in the first round. Why did Porter fall out of the first round? I'm told there was concern about the lack of production. He's a bit of a grabby sort of corner. There's a lot of holding. That fundamental issue was a concern. Why he fell down, plus just the number of corners in this year's draft. The Steelers have to love it. Now, the problem with the Steelers is they've had a lot of busts with their early selections at the cornerback position. They don't seem to be a franchise that knows how to really develop corners that they take in early in the draft. We talked about that last night with the Baltimore Ravens at the receiver position. So they got a real good prospect. Obviously, the lineage is there. The bloodlines are there in the organization. They've got to be really happy. They've got to take it from here and develop Joey Porter into the cornerback that everyone believes he can be.
John, Joey Porter Sr., an obvious Pittsburgh Steelers legend. Some Dolphins fans might fondly remember his big sack season, one of the 2 years he was there. What are your thoughts on this pick, being as fond of the Steelers organization as you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Porter is the best cornerback on the board left for me, and so I certainly get taking him here. I don't think he's without concern. This, as Tony said, he's very grabby. He is not as technical as people would like to believe. With that length and the athleticism that he has, you would love for him to be a really technical press man corner at the line of scrimmage, and he really isn't that. He gets his hands on guys, but it's a lot of grabbing and pulling on guys until he can get back in phase, and that's kind of how he plays the position. He could be a flag machine in the NFL for sure early on. It is going to be all about technique development for him because the tools, the length that he has, it's actually hilarious to look at him on tape and like his arms knock him off balance sometimes, I think, because of how long they are. And so he is going to have to develop in a few key ways for sure. And the other thing is you'd love to see more ball production. The Steelers have really prioritized that. And it seems like in this pick, they're going for the tools and the lineage angle here. I certainly understand Porter in this system. It's an interesting mix of DBs there now because there's Levi Wallace there, who's probably been more of his own corner in his career, but this team wants to play more man, and last year did. Patrick Peterson has basically been cooked in man schemes for the last couple of years. Now he's going from a zone-heavy scheme in Minnesota to a scheme that I think would want to play more man. I don't know how that fit's going to go. And now you have Joey Porter Jr., who a lot of people thought was kind of like a press zone corner. So what are they going to do? Are they going to be more of a zone-heavy team this team? It seems like maybe they will be, but either way, Porter's going to need considerable development, but I do think he was the best player at a position of need for them. And like Tony said, it's clear they didn't get what they wanted to be able to move off of him, a player that they probably would have considered earlier than this in the draft.
The other thing about Porter is you could tell from his freshman year at Penn State that he had the makings of a great cornerback prospect, but I think he underachieved. He didn't meet expectations. As far as I'm concerned, I expected him to be a much better cornerback now than what he actually was based off of what I saw Joey Porter during his freshman season at Penn State.
Well, look, the Cardinals are currently on the clock with pick 33. We're still waiting for that pick to come in. As soon as it does, we will bring that to you, assuming it isn't traded. But as of right now, it's not in yet. Let's stay on Joey Porter for a second. John, you mentioned a lot of the development he needs. A lot of times we think about the player needing to develop, but in reality, he is joining an existing environment where he's going to have to go learn from coaches who need to be able to teach. Do the Steelers, in your opinion, have the staff capable of developing him in the way he needs it? Oh, excuse me, actually, before you answer that, I do want to announce to everybody that the Titans, as Tony has mentioned at the top of the show, who are looking to trade up, they've traded into pick number 33 with the Arizona Cardinals. So now the Titans are on the clock. Heavy speculation they want to trade up for a quarterback. Could be Hooker. As Tony mentioned, Will Levis seemed to be who they were into, but maybe they're leaning more towards Hendon Hooker now. We don't yet know the compensation. As soon as we do, we will bring that to you as well, along with the Titans pick once they make it. Tony, the Titans wasting no time.
And obviously this is going to be for a quarterback. And Hendon Hooker makes a lot of sense. You still got Ryan Tannehill there. You're probably going to have Ryan Tannehill for another year. Hendon Hooker's not going to play in 2023. So Hooker makes a lot of sense. Hooker is much more polished than Will Levis, who, as we talked about at the start of the show, is more of a gunslinger who is, very content throwing the ball down the field. But I reported early in the day it was going to be Will Levis. We'll see what it is, who the pick.
Well, we do know who the pick is. With the 33rd pick, following a trade with the Arizona Cardinals, the Tennessee Titans in the 2023 NFL Draft are selecting quarterback Will Levis, the quarterback out of Kentucky. His slide ends. He's the 39th overall prospect on the PFN consensus big board. He comes in at 6'3", weighing 232 pounds. And with that pick, hashtag Will Watch officially comes to an end. Tony, you mentioned the Titans were certainly interested in Will Levis. Maybe they were leaning towards Hooker. In the end, it's Levis. How do you like the fit?
They better have a good quarterback coach. They really have to develop his game. He's much more of a downfield passer. It could also be a situation where they're going to be looking to play the rookie quarterback earlier. And there was talk that, when they were called to the clock yesterday, that Levis was a player of interest for them before they took Skoronski. There's a lot of issues with Levis's game, so it'll be interesting to see. He's got a great amount of upside, but he's got to go from being a thrower to a passer.
Yeah,
John, your thoughts too on the pick?
Yeah, played in two different offensive systems over his time in college. So if you go back a year, he does look a lot better. This past year felt like things were very simple for him at times and didn't really get a chance to show off that much, in my opinion. But I love the fact that he has a super quick release. I think that is a really helpful trait for a quarterback. There are other things that need work, particularly how he sees and throws to the middle of the field. But I think he's willing to do that. That's often, I think, is one of the things that separates good and great quarterbacks is just the willingness to attack the middle of the field. A lot of guys are real comfortable going outside with quick throws, but how well you see and how courageously you throw and with what kind of anticipation and timing through the middle of the field, that can really set quarterbacks apart. And I think he's willing there, has to keep improving there. There's a lot to work with here. I think he's a sharp guy. I think he can do a lot of the things like coaching wise. This is why I think the Rams would have been really interested and probably one of the teams trying to move up here for him. I think if he can respond well to coaching, there's certainly the ability to develop him here. I think that makes sense. And they can bring him along slowly too over time, which is good with Tannehill there. So I think all four of these quarterbacks that have gone in great landing spots for them. There's some unknown with the Texans' whole coaching situation right now, but about as good as you could hope for in terms of landing spots for four quarterbacks that are probably going to go to teams that aren't very good right now. I think these guys all kind of lucked out and went to spots that are relatively stable given the situations that they're going to be in.
I do have a couple more questions on this. But before I get to those with you guys, I want to just touch on what the compensation was between the Cardinals and the Titans that allowed this trade to take place. The Cardinals moved down to 41, and they get pick 72 from the Tennessee Titans. As the second half of that trade, the Titans moved up to 33, and essentially swapped their 72nd pick, and now will be picking at 81. They also get a 2024 third rounder from the Titans. And before we can get into this, and as you guys mentioned, round 2 tends to move very quickly. The Detroit Lions have made their pick at pick 34, and that is Sam Laporta, tight end. Sam Laporta becomes the second tight end off the board. And maybe that's somewhat of a surprise, gentlemen. We've talked about Dalton Kincaid coming off to the Bills. And then a lot of question was about Michael Mayer, the tight end out of Notre Dame, but it's Sam Laporta. Tony, what are your thoughts on Laporta not just being going to the Lions here, but that he's the second tight end off the board?
He had been rising up draft boards, or he had been, I would say, underappreciated outside of the scouting community. Laporta's been a terrific tight end at Iowa the past 3 years. He's a little bit faster. He's got better playing speed than Michael Mayer. He's not as good as a blocker, but he's a terrific blocker in his own right. He's a complete tight end. He's more of a well-rounded tight end compared to Dalton Kincaid. He was very consistent at Iowa, a real good player, ran well at the combine, ran much faster, I think, than most people expected. He's not the true downfield threat. He's not a 4-5 guy, but he's been very consistent in that Iowa offense for the longest time now, for the past 3 years. And they are a program that consistently churns out real good tight ends, as we've seen. We all thought, or a lot of people thought, that Detroit was going to take a tight end with that 18th pick. You also thought that maybe Michael Mayer was more the Dan Campbell type of tight end, but I think it improves the team speed at that position for Detroit. Could totally understand the pick. I think it's not only a good pick, but it's a very safe pick, and it improves them at the tight end position.
John, how did you have the tight ends ranked? Does Laporta make sense for you here?
Laporta is actually my number 2 tight end in the class.
Wow,
and no one expected him to be the second tight end. I had Kincaid first and Laporta second. So I love this, but I think I'll probably be the only one. Most people really thought Mayer or Washington were going to be pretty close to this, be the next guy off the board. I just felt like as I watched Laporta early on in the process, tight end was one of the first groups I scouted. I was like, why are more people not talking about this guy? Like, phenomenal athlete. Yes, there were a few drops on his tape, but overall still good hands. And the post-catch ability for a tight end. He has a touchdown against Kentucky that is one of the most jaw-dropping run-after-catch plays I've ever seen by a tight end. And it's going to be on all the highlight shows and everything, obviously, now that he's been selected. But this guy is an absolute weapon. The ways that Iowa used him, I mean, that was one of the worst offenses in the country, and he did everything for them. He lined up out as the X receiver against top corners for the other team, and he had releases against press coverage at the line of scrimmage, winning inside, running slants, making contested catches in that way. He really has receiver-like movement, and he's going to do that in this offense. This is very much going to be, we're going to spread him out. We're going to rip the ball around the yard. They're not going to ask that much of him as a blocker. I think if they do, it'll be moving across the formation, that kind of stuff. But it's a great pick. I love it. I didn't expect it to be this high, but I think it's a great fit, and he'll be the replacement for TJ Hawkinson.
Well, as things continue to go in round 2, it does not get any less fast and furious because there's been a trade. The Las Vegas Raiders have traded up. They are now selecting, and they're going to make the 35th pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. When that pick is in and we have the compensation, we'll let you know on both of those fronts. Before those picks come in and we ask any more questions, again, want to give shout-outs to everybody. Excuse me, the Colts pick. Yes, the Colts and the Raiders made the trade. The pick is in. The third tight end has now come off the board. It's who a lot of us maybe expected to be the first or second tight end. He's the third tight end. Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame, goes to the Las Vegas Raiders. He's a 26th overall prospect on the PFN big board. He comes in at 6'4", 251 pounds. Tony, Michael Mayer didn't have to wait long, even if Laporta did go in front of him.
He didn't, and they traded Waller in the offseason. I am very surprised that this selection was not Hendon Hooker. Very surprised to say that. Michael Mayer, I don't know if Josh McDaniels sees him as a Gronkowski type, but really he's a throwback type of tight end. In the 1980s, this is what your number one tight end would look like. Not a great downfield threat, but a real terrific intermediate pass catcher in that 8 to 15-yard range. He'll get up in a crowd and come down with the ball with 3 defenders draped on him. He's an outstanding blocker, was a consistent pass catcher for a number of years at Notre Dame. The only thing is he's not a great athlete. He did run a 4.7 at the combine, which is faster than many of us thought he was capable of. Really doesn't play to that 4.7 speed, but he's well-rounded in all areas. In those short yardage situations, 3rd and goal, you're going to put him you're going to use him either as a blocker or as a short yardage pass catcher. Regardless of that, I am still surprised that the pick was not Hendon Hooker for the Las Vegas Raiders.
Well, the Rams were highly speculated to be moving up, John, as you mentioned, to try to get Will Levis. They are now on the clock. Maybe they pivot to Hendon Hooker. We'll see if that pick comes in. We'll let you know as soon as we do. But, John, let's stay with Michael Mayer. He wasn't your number 2. You had Laporta as your number 2. Michael Mayer going right behind him as a 3rd tight end off the board. What did you see in Michael Mayer in your evaluation?
Yeah, tight end 3 for me. Good player for sure. Does all the little things really well, right? He's a guy that Notre Dame trusted. They said, hey, we'll move you out here. We'll flex you out. You can be like the lead guy, the point guy on screens. We trust you with that. Like, we'll pull you across the formation on these counter plays. You can bleed block for us. We'll double with you, and you can down block because you can do all that. He can do everything right away. And so that's the allure with him, I think, is that there's no situation where you have to figure out where he can be schemed off the field. He's even a good enough route runner to be flexed out if you need him to do that and do some things as a route runner out there. He knows how to beat zone coverage as well. So if he's going to be really good in the NFL, like a tight end 1 type of producer, a guy who fits into the top 1 or 2 tiers of tight ends in the NFL, which is where some people project him. I believe he's the highest offensive player left on Arif Hassan's consensus big board of all the big boards that are out there that he puts together. And so if he's going to be that good, live up to what people's expectations are for him, he has to be the savviest tight end in the league, because as Tony said, he's just not a very good athlete. And he tested like an okay athlete, which was a big win for him. But he just isn't a great athlete. You can see it on tape. There's not a lot of twitchiness. There's not a lot of long speed. He sometimes looks very stiff when he's trying to turn and find and catch the ball. He doesn't have long arms, so he is good size overall, but then he showed up to the combine and was lighter than you expected to. Maybe that was to run better, and if he bulks back up to be as good a blocker as he is, maybe he loses some of that speed and athleticism. So I have questions about what the ceiling is, but the floor to me is like a high-end number 2 tight end for you. And the ceiling could be like that he becomes, one of these solid, savvy Heath Miller type players in the NFL. They're not as in vogue as they once were, but they're still pretty useful.
Yeah. Tony, any chance we see a run on tight ends now? Is that going to be a concern? Or teams do they now have to get before the value falls off a cliff here?
Well, I mean, it's a deep tight end class. So you're going to have good tight ends in the 3rd round. You're going to have some decent tight ends in day 3. As far as a run is concerned, I mean, Luke Musgrave is still out there. Darnell Washington, he's a different type of tight end. I'm looking at the list here. You look at the teams that are coming up. I don't think that there's going to be a huge run. Maybe we have another tight end or 2 taken within the next 10 picks. I don't think it's going to be a situation like we saw last night with the wide receivers.
Okay, and real quick, I do have an update on the compensation between the Colts and Raiders trade. Remember, it was the Colts who traded back so the Raiders could come up and make this pick. The Colts get pick 38 and pick 141 from the Raiders, who move up to 35 to make this selection. So just real quick, it's a 2-for-1 deal there. The pick from the Rams is in, by the way. So we can announce that with the 36th pick in the NFL draft of 2023, the Los Angeles Rams select one of my all-time favorite people in this draft, guard out of TCU, Steve Avila. He is, we don't have a graphics video for him, but he is a character. He is going to be a big locker room presence for the Rams, and he's a pretty decent interior O-lineman as well. Tony, what are your thoughts here?
Big is the word to use when you describe Avila, correct? I mean, the cat goes 6'3.5", 332 pounds. His testing marks were solid at the combine, but his position work was outstanding. Played both center and guard for TCU. A terrific power gap blocker. Will just knock defenders off the line of scrimmage. Gets a lot of movement run blocking. Solid in pass protection. Again, more of a power gap guy. I don't know you're going to use him that much in motion. Although, during combine position drills when I was there, he showed a lot of good movement skills. He showed that, You may not want to use him in motion on a consistent basis, but he's not a liability on those occasions where you may send him out to the second level or pull him across the line of scrimmage. Very consistent player, very smart player, very tough player, just not a great athlete. But, sometimes you want to run a power gap system. You want those big body guys in the middle of the line. That's what Avila will do for you.
Well, we had a bunch of tackles come off the board in the first round last night. This is the first, depending on where Skoronski ends up playing, the first dedicated interior offensive lineman to come off the board. John, what do you think about this pick?
I really like it. He's my top, other than Skoronski, who I think we all know to be off the board of this range, and some people see as a tackle. He's my top interior offensive lineman in this draft. Some people had Osiris Torrance over him. I didn't quite see it that way. To me, Avila was better than him. I think Avila also was outstanding at the Senior Bowl, which helped his stock as well. And as you mentioned, the personality, the demeanor, I think teams really feel like they know what they're getting. And shout out to the Rams here because they've done some wild things in the draft in a couple recent years. I think you Atwell pick probably pretty much broke my mind when it happened a couple years ago. And obviously they've given up most of their picks. They've swung big on some of the picks that they've kept. And when I really felt like they could have added a couple stable win now pieces. And I know Avila can be a good piece down the road too, but they need stability in that offensive line. I mean, when I watched them last year, especially at the beginning portion of the year, I thought Matt Stafford, he eventually did get hurt, obviously, but it would just look like he was playing for his life every single snap. And Avila is just a steady, solid pass protector. He's a contributor in the run game as well. You're not going to go through him as a pass protector. And what I like about him is that although he's not this great athlete in space, he is really good independent hand usage, and he's unbelievably calm and precise with his strikes and pass protection. So I love that part about his game. He's always under control, which I like. If he can just start taking better angles in the run game, getting off the ball consistently, those kind of things, I think really he's going to be like at least like a tier 2 guard in the NFL. I don't know if he has tier 1 elite guard ceiling, but I would feel really good about him getting to the next tier at least.
You love his hand usage, huh? I gotta give credit to his technique coach wherever we can find him. Anyway, really, really excited.
I feel like we should be asking you for comments on it.
Really excited to see him get drafted. I think he's going to be great at the Rams, and he really is a great personality. One of those guys who, when he's off the field, he's a comedian. He's a real funny guy, real light personality, but as soon as the whistle blows and the game starts, real nasty kind of demeanor. Real fun to see how that goes in the NFC West. So we'll see how that plays out. Now, with the Rams having made this pick, the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock. This is another selection where we could be seeing them take a quarterback of the future. Could be a Hendon Hooker selection here, maybe not. The Colts, because of the trade with the Raiders, are going to be selecting next after the Seahawks, followed by the Panthers and Saints. Tony, when I said the Seahawks could be a possible destination for a quarterback, you gave me that look, which was like, Brett, you're an idiot. Tell me what you think the Seahawks could be thinking here.
Well, we already know.
I can tell you what they're thinking. With this pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Seattle Seahawks are selecting Derek Hall out of Auburn. He is an edge player out of Mississippi. He is the 40th ranked player on the PFN Consensus Big Board. He comes in at 6'3", weighing 256 pounds. Tony, he's got a pretty unique makeup physically. What are your thoughts on Derek Hall and his fit in Seattle?
Yeah, Auburn. I mean, they need an edge rusher. The thing is with Derek Hall, I hate to pigeonhole this guy as just an edge rusher because he is a real good linebacker in all areas. Yeah, he'll get up the field and terrorize the opposing quarterback, but he can change direction, get out into space, make plays in pursuit. He's not great in pass coverage, but he's not awful in pass coverage. He just does a lot of things very well. I mean, he is a linebacker as well as being an edge rusher. Definitely the Seahawks type of guy, very explosive, had a terrific last 2 seasons, I should say, at Auburn. And, this is a player that the type of player that they needed. We talked about them potentially taking Tyree Wilson in round 1 as their edge rusher. Derek Hall is smaller, obviously, probably not as athletic, not as forceful up the field, but you can do more things with Derek Hall.
All right, John, before we get to you, just want to let you know the Colts are trading back again. So they are not going to be making this pick at 38. Instead, the Atlanta Falcons have moved into this 38th slot. I think we have an idea of what that might be about, but we'll see. They are on the clock. As soon as that pick comes in, We will let you know. Expect it shortly. Teams trade up. It's because they know who they're taking. Shouldn't be much longer here. But real quick, John, let us know what you think about Derek Hall going to the Seattle Seahawks.
Well, the Seahawks were doing too many things that I agreed with, so they had to shake it up here. I'm not as big a Derek Hall fan as some other people are, but I understand, like, this is a very competitive guy, very physical, long arms, hard charger type. He loves to run. He tries to run through everybody's face on every single snap. Sometimes he's successful and it makes a highlight reel. A lot of times it isn't, and he needs counter moves. He needs to develop his hands because he's not the bendiest guy, so I don't think he's going to win the easy way, the Von Miller way on the outside shoulder of the tackle all that often. So you've got to figure out other ways to win, right? If you're not going to be that guy that's going to win with speed and bend, how are you going to win? And for him, it's going to have to be speed to power and inside counter moves. So he's got to perfect the long arm and the bull rush, and there's flashes of it, but his hand usage, other than that, when he gets locked up, he really has struggles to get off blocks and make an impact as a pass rusher. As we all know, that's what these picks are about, what the juice that you give on passing downs. And so I have a lot of questions there. I'm not that big a fan of anybody left in the edge class, though, really. So I understand what they're doing. They clearly need help in that department, and we'll just see if he can develop into that guy.
Yeah, if you're not going to be able to beat that outside shoulder, you got to get that long arm going, and then you got to develop a ghost arm with it so that you got to be savvy and strategic on the edge. If you're not going to do it with pure ability, you got to get the offensive tackles thinking one thing while you do another. It's what makes Max Crosby as phenomenal as he is. We'll see if Derek Hall can really develop some of those skills in Seattle. Again, we are waiting for the Atlanta Falcons to make the 38th pick of the 2023 NFL draft. They have traded into this pick with the Colts, who were in the pick because they traded back from 35. So the Colts looking to just keep going down and down and down. As soon as we know what that pick is, we will let you know. And we do know, with the 38th pick of the 2023 NFL draft, the Atlanta Falcons are selecting Matt Bergeron out of Syracuse. Tony, at the top of last night's show, you said Matt Bergeron was quickly rising up draft boards, maybe even to the back end of round one. He's going to go at the top end of round two. What are your thoughts on this selection? And what are your thoughts on this selection for Atlanta trading up to get it?
Bit surprising for Atlanta, only because they put a lot of resources in the offseason into that offensive line. We think that was settled, but you just drafted Bijan Robinson. You got Desmond Ridder there. You got to protect Ridder. You got to open holes for Bijan Robinson. Bergeron is a guy who a lot of people liked leading into the draft. He's an athletic offensive lineman, played left tackle at Syracuse, was a real good offensive lineman at Syracuse the past 3 years. He's a guy who is terrific in pass protection, very mobile, gets out on the second level, shows the ability to block in motion. Wasn't a great run blocker. Wasn't a guy who got a lot of movement run blocking, would get pushed around at times. Some people say he could play right tackle. I don't agree with that. Some people say he may be better off at guard. I say try him at left tackle until he fails because it's such a critical position. And he showed such terrific ability for 3 years at Syracuse at the left tackle spot. If he can't make it at left tackle, maybe you kick him inside the guard. I think this is a guy who's very good now and has got a tremendous amount of upside. And just as he physically matures and gets into an NFL weight training program, his game should improve.
John, what are your thoughts on Bergeron going into this process? As we said, not a lot of people had him going this high, but the scouts seem to be moving him up draft boards very quickly the closer we got to draft night. Here he goes at the round of top 2.
A lot to work with, I think. Just even if he doesn't end up being a tackle, some people have him as a guard. If it doesn't end up being a tackle, I think Atlanta can still make great use of him. They have all these guys on their offensive line, right? They've put all these resources in. Chris Lindstrom has been the guy that stood out. McGarry took a step last year. I didn't think he had it in him, but he took a step last year. Now you have Dolman and you have Hennessy and you have Jalen Mayfield, who was super disappointing when he got some playing time. And some of these guys have started to show something. But you've also got the Jake Matthews, right? The aging guy on the offensive line. Do they just say, okay, you're going to be the left tackle in waiting, and when Matthews is done, you'll step into that role? That would be my guess, would be their primary concern for him. But there could be a possibility that he comes in and competes on one of these interior offensive line spots, maybe competes with Hennessy at left guard. We'll see how they choose to use him. certainly obviously Atlanta's been a pretty heavy zone, heavy scheme with Arthur Smith there. And I think that he operated a diverse system for sure at Syracuse, but plenty of inside zone, plenty of outside zone. And so he's got a pretty good chance to be a good fit there early on too.
All right. Carolina is on the clock as we speak. I don't wonder, Tony, I'd love to get your insight on this. Usually when a team trades up to grab a player, it's because they suspect the team in front of them is going to take that player. Who could the Falcons have really been concerned about out of Carolina, New Orleans, Arizona, Green Bay, or maybe the Jets were going to grab Bergeron before they could?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the list here, the Jets are, an offensive line needy team. They need a left tackle.
Tony, I apologize to do this. The Panthers have made their selection, so much so that I'm getting yelled at in all caps in our chat room here. But the Carolina Panthers, with the 39th pick of the 2023 NFL Draft, are selecting Jonathan Mingo. He goes to the Carolina Panthers and joins the NFC South. Tony, I know you can do it and pivot quickly. Thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, he's a very underrated wide receiver. Not the highest rated available receiver on my board, but still, he's got an A.J. Brown type of body. He ran exceptionally well at the combine. He was a guy that whenever the ball was thrown to him at Mississippi, he caught the pass very quick for a 221-pound receiver, very reliable. Also a guy who knows what's happening on the field, does a good job coming back to the quarterback, making himself an available target. For the most part, fundamentally sound, will extend his hands and catch the pass away from his body. They needed a receiver. I would like Cedric Tillman of Tennessee myself, but I could understand the allure of Jonathan Mingo.
Yeah, I'm with Tony and like Tillman a lot, but I understand it with Mingo too, because there's this upside there, right? And if you're Carolina, you're developing, right? Like you're building for the future. You don't necessarily need the guy who's the most pro ready, and Tillman is a little bit more pro ready for sure. But the thing with Mingo is difficult scout because he's one of the first wing wide receivers I've ever scouted. Like he lined up as a wing for Ole Miss, and a lot of his releases into vertical routes were as a wing. And so we really have to totally figure out with him whether he can get off the line of scrimmage against press coverage, things like that. But he has the size and he has the athleticism, 220 pounds. Like he is built. He looks physically like A.J. Brown, obviously the Ole Miss connection as well. I'm not comparing the two's game. I know a lot of people have. To me, that comparison is tough to make because Brown actually played at the line of scrimmage, even if he did play mostly in the slot. And Mingo did play some at the line of scrimmage, some of the slot, even some out wide, but not that much. And so the question with him will be how he develops in the finer arts of playing the wide receiver position. Right now, a lot of clean releases and run to space. Everything else in the route concept is designed to get you open. Okay, that works in college, and you could certainly see really good traits. Speed down the field, ball tracking ability, some post-catch ability at times. Love those things to build around. Very critical. The ball tracking especially shows me he's a natural catcher of the football down the field. The questions for me will be, can he do wide receiver stuff? Because at Ole Miss, they just designed it up for him and got him the ball, and it'll be a lot harder in the NFL.
Always a great thing when you're asking if a wide receiver can do, quote, wide receiver stuff, end quote. So we'll see. Hopefully that works out there in Carolina. They got rid of DJ Moore in the trade up to number 1 overall. So weapons galore is what they need to surround Bryce Young with. Tony, quick question for you. Jalen Hyatt, not the pick here. A lot of people, I think us included, assumed he'd be the next wide receiver off the board. Any concern he might slide further than expected?
Well, he's obviously has slided further than a lot of people expected a month ago, right? A month and a half ago. But as I said on the Football Insider show, when people were mocking him to be a potential bottom third of round 1 guy, I was hearing he was going to fall out of the first round. Really, the only savior for him in the first round was the Kansas City Chiefs last night, who liked him a lot and who needed a receiver, but they went with the pass rusher from Kansas State. The thing about Jalen Hyatt is this. He showed himself to be, a downfield threat, run all those go patterns at Tennessee, but then he goes to the combine. He barely runs under 4.4. I think it was a 4.39. He doesn't have an expanded route tree. The interviews did not go well at the combine. A lot of teams were taken back by that. And he was the beneficiary of Cedric Tillman getting hurt. Did a great job, Jalen Hyatt. Take nothing away from him. But I think when teams look at Jalen Hyatt, they're looking at an unpolished receiver, or at least an unpolished route runner who doesn't have an expanded route tree, who is not as fast, 40 fast as he is on the field. And then there were questions throughout the interview process, which is why Hyatt's fallen.
All right. Yeah, we'll see what happens. Look, we are now coming up on, I believe we're up to pick 40, and it's the New Orleans Saints who are on the clock. John, what are your thoughts so far on round 2? And as we've gotten into pick 40, as we wait for that pick to come in, how's the round gone so far from what you've expected?
Yeah, 2 things stand out. 6 of the 8 picks on the offensive side of the ball. And so all those defensive picks in the first round, obviously the corners, 7 edge rushers, 4 defensive tackles, a linebacker we didn't expect. Like, there were plenty of stuff on the defensive side of the ball, right? And now we're seeing the offensive side of the ball. We're seeing the run on the tight ends a little bit. And the interior offensive line starting to get going after none, well, unless you count Skoronski in the first round. And then I think the other interesting thing is the corners, right? We're at pick 40. And we have only had 1 go off the board today. We'll have Joey Porter Jr. And yesterday, 3 in the first round, or 4 in the first round, I think. And so it's been fine so far, but I think people said this is the deepest position group in the draft. And that still may be so. It may be that the depth is about to come, or the run is about to really happen here. But so far, I think a lot of cornerback needy teams have come and gone here. And I'm a little bit surprised. The corners are a little bit further down the board than maybe we thought they'd be, although I still expect several by the end of the second.
Yeah, well, the Saints pick is in, and they are not selecting a corner, so that corner wait will continue. With pick number 40 in the 2023 NFL Draft, the New Orleans Saints are selecting edge player Isaiah Foskey out of Notre Dame. He is the 24th overall ranked player on the consensus big board for PFN. He comes in at 6'5", weighing in at 260 pounds. Tony, what are your thoughts on this player and this fit in New Orleans, who needed an edge player?
They did, but I thought there were better edge players. I like Foskey, but I think this is early for him. Foskey was a sort of a feast or famine player at Notre Dame, even at the Senior Bowl. I mean, he's a guy that can exploit tackles off the edge. He's got good speed. He's not a real bendy type of guy, but there are times he gets obliterated at the point of attack against the run. So they go with Brise last night. They add Foskey. He's a guy who can come out of a 3-point stance. He can occasionally stand over tackle. He's a decent athlete, ran relatively well at the combine. He showed flashes of brilliance at Notre Dame where he was unstoppable, but he was also very streaky. There would be times where he would disappear. Good player. I just think that they probably could have waited around a little bit longer. May have been available to them in the 3rd round.
Yeah, and it's interesting. We talked about edge play, better edge players still maybe being on the board when Derek Hall got selected. We're saying the same thing with Isaiah Foskey getting selected. We'll see as these continue. I want to come back to you, John, though, just on your thoughts here on round 2. What cornerbacks are still on the board that we should expect to kind of hear their names over the last couple of picks? Who are the ones you have your eyes on?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple. There was some buzz that Julius Brents could sneak in. Tony probably knows more about that. I just know what I'm hearing from other people's reports. But Julius Brents could sneak in to the first round, has like the size, speed, length combination the teams usually take in this portion of the draft. So he's one to keep an eye on. Obviously, Ringo from Georgia, that I thought he was always a little overhyped, but we are getting to the point in the draft where he probably is going to be high on some teams' boards. Cam Smith from South Carolina had some first-round buzz. That was a little rich for me, but he is the top corner left on my board. DJ Turner from Michigan picked up some steam as the process went on. Maybe he's a slot only, and that hurts him a little bit. And I thought the Saints could be a spot that maybe consider some of these guys. I mean, they still believe in Adebo, certainly, but, they're always trying to load up on corners at some point. Someone may want to tell them there are other position groups outside of defensive line. It feels like we haven't seen them really take a high-profile pick that wasn't a defensive lineman in some time. But I'm with Tony. I think there were better players than Foskey. They have 2 players now in Brise and Foskey that I wasn't that high on when I watched their tape. I wanted to be. Both guys play hard and play the right way for sure. Very physical. I think they're going to be good character guys for them, but I think that neither of them can be like lead pass rushers for a team on the interior and the exterior. So they're good picks. They'll be good depth guys. They'll be good rotation guys, I think, but I don't know that they got a difference maker at either of those spots. And that could be something they look back and wish that maybe they'd went another direction.
Yeah,
It's just 2
you know,
points on what John said. I'm a big fan of DJ Turner. I always have been. A little bit smaller, but I think he's got first-round ball skills. Cam Smith is going to fall. He's got some major off-the-field issues we could talk about, but the pick is in.
The pick is in. And with the next pick in this draft, the Arizona Cardinals making the pick at 41 following a trade down to this pick have selected B.J. Ojulari, the edge player out of LSU. He's the 47th ranked player on the consensus PFN big board. He comes in at 6'3", 245 pounds. Tony, is this one of those better edge players still on the board you thought could have gone higher than the last two edge players who have been selected?
I thought he should have been off of the film, but remember, Ojulari didn't work out before the draft. He had an injury. He kept pushing the workout back. So he's an underclassman, which means there's very limited knowledge about his testing numbers as opposed to, say, some of the seniors who may have tested in the previous spring. But you watch the film with Ojulari, he's explosive. He is incredibly quick. He's a ferocious guy. He's not only a good up-the-field edge rusher, he'll change direction and get out into space to make plays. He's good in pursuit. He's got a bit of a thinner body, so he's going to have to add some bulk. But still, with the Arizona Cardinals, the system that they're going to play, you stand them over tackle. You have a real, you have a solid prospect who, if he continues to improve, and he was a better player in 2022 than he was in 2021, you could have a real good second-round choice in the future.
John, thoughts on Ojulari here?
Yeah, he was my top edge that was left. I have concerns. My concern with him mainly is when I watched him on tape was he has to win athletically to win, I think. He's kind of the opposite of Foskey in some ways, where Foskey has like this speed to power, and when he gets off the ball well and he gets his long arms in, he can affect things a little bit in terms of the bull rush. He can also end up getting kind of trapped and snatched and grabbed and put on his face too. So there are it ebbs and flows with him a little bit. And with Ojulari, it's kind of, he's not going to be a speed to power rusher. So he's got to win on that outside hip, I think. And he does a good job to manipulate tackles. And there is some moments on tape where you see the bend. There are also a lot of moments where he struggles to work through any type of contact without getting pushed up the top of the arc. When he ran the 7.57 at the pro day, that was where I felt like the stock kind of dipped because he needed to kill that drill. Like basically that's the bend drill. Like that's what you need to show. And the jumps weren't great either from what I recall. So I think that kind of dipped the stock a little bit, but he's still the guard board of 41 is good
for the people watching at home. When you say the 7.57, that's the bend drill. You're talking about the 3-cone shuttle that's done at the combine for those who are watching who may not be so familiar. For pass rushers and edge players, that's sort of the thing that stands out for a lot of the scouts is how do they do in that 3-cone drill? That's where you see a lot of bending around tight corners. You run a little figure 8 in the second leg of that drill there, and how can you get back around the corner on the way back in? That's kind of what we're referring to there. But the pick is in. The third tight end of the second round has been selected, guys. The Green Bay Packers finally pick an offensive player, showing that they care a little bit about their quarterbacks. They are going with tight end Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State. Luke Musgrave is now the 4th tight end selected in this NFL draft. There was 1 tight end selected in the first round. He becomes the 4th overall and the 3rd selected today. Talking about a tight end run, Tony, thoughts on Luke Musgrave and his fit in Green Bay?
Well, I mean, he's a guy who hasn't played a lot of football in the past couple of years. He was injured last year. I believe he played only 2 or 3 games. Incredibly athletic. I mean, we talked about Will Levis not showing up at the Senior Bowl. Luke Musgrave showed up at the Senior Bowl, and he wasn't 100% healthy. He said, you know what? I just want to play football. I haven't played football in such a long period of time. He's a tall, athletic guy. He's more of your Dalton Kincaid type of tight end versus your Michael Mayer type of tight end, a real tight end who plays the position like he's a receiver, very athletic. He's got exceptional length. Blocking isn't his forte. He's going to have to get a little bit stronger. But if you're looking for a receiver, to get down the seam and make the catch, Musgrave is your guy. And it's not just the Packers are taking an offensive player. The Packers are taking a pass catcher, within the first 2 rounds of the draft finally, because they've taken some running backs in the past. They've taken some, offensive line, but they're taking a pass catcher. And you want to get Jordan Love another set of potential reliable hands. I think Musgrave is that type of guy. I think it'll take a little bit of time for the transition because he hasn't played much football recently. Obviously, the step up from the Pac-12 into the NFC North. But again, a guy who, will probably have a solid rookie season in the NFL, but he's got a lot of upside potential.
John, thoughts on Musgrave here? You had Laporta as number 2. I think you said Michael Mayer was your number 3. Was Musgrave your 4th-ranked tight end?
No, Musgrave is actually 6th for me, and here's why. 23 years old, and he's basically Mike Gesicki, which we saw how hard it is to get a player like that on the field, I think, without the college resume that Mike Gesicki had, which was quite impressive. 47 career receptions, 2 total touchdowns. We didn't see a ton of production. There were drops when we did see him play. That concerns me a good bit. He is very rudimentary as a route runner right now. Like Tony said, he'll run the seam, and he can snag the ball outside his frame. But they're also, as I mentioned, the drops are there too and present with him. Already 23 or will be 23 years old, I believe, when his rookie season starts. So that's a little bit of a concern to me as well. I mean, the 47 career catches is tough to keep coming back to. Like, there's just not a lot of production. And the other thing about him that's concerning is that he broke just 2 tackles throughout his entire college career. Very easy to get to the ground after the catch. To me, guys like Laporta and Kincaid, just with the ball skills, the amount of contested catches that they had for Kincaid, how few drops that he had, the post-catch ability, like they were just like, if you are going to take a tight end who's not going to be an asset as a blocker, those guys are just far and away better options than Musgrave. He needs to be in a system, and we'll see how Green Bay uses him and how much Aaron Rodgers held sway over their offensive system in the past. But he needs to be in a system that's going to use him like a wide receiver. That's going to be a big vertical pass catching type down the field, because that is what his skill set is. Outside of that, he needs a lot of work, but he can help you with some splash plays if that's what your team needs. I just don't know how he could be a tight end 1. You're going to have to pair him with other tight ends who complement his skill set.
Well, you talk about the comparison between Musgrave and Gesicki. In college, Gesicki had 129 career receptions with 15 touchdowns. In 4 seasons at Oregon State, Musgrave with only 47 career receptions and 2 total touchdowns. So he has a lot to sort of catch up on there. So we'll see how he does in Green Bay. You got to hope the development really works out there. But Tony, the New York Jets are on the clock. They surprised us in the first round with Will McDonald. They seemingly got outmaneuvered for Broderick Jones.
Yeah, I think that at this point in time, they got to address the offensive line, which I thought we'd do last night. I think it's going to be one of the centers.
Yep.
I think it's going to be John Michael Schmitz, maybe Joe Tippmann. I know that Joe Douglas likes the bigger center. They signed Connor McGovern to what amounts to a backup deal just last week because they had such a need at the center position. I think, John Michael Schmitz makes sense in that he's an immediate starter. Joe Tippmann is a guy who could be much better 2 or 3 years down the road, can be all over the place. I gotta think it's going to be one of the centers.
Well, Tony, as usual, you are correct. The pick is in with the 43rd overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. The New York Jets do select one of those centers, and it is Joe Tippmann. He is the center selected by the Jets. Tony, weeks ago on Football Insiders, you pegged the Jets as one of the teams who would be taking one of the top 2 centers in the draft. You categorized their need as, quote, desperate at the time. How do you feel about this pick? Was it the right center for them?
It's the Jets are built to win immediately. The Jets need guys that can come in and start right away, and that's what Tippmann's going to do. I think that Tippmann could be a better long-term center than John Michael Schmitz of Minnesota, but I think John Michael Schmitz doesn't have the same downside risk. I mean, John Michael Schmitz, I believe, is an NFL-ready center. I'm sure the New York Giants are very happy that he's still on the board. Tippmann is your typical Wisconsin blocker. I mean, he's a mauler. He's a punch-in-the-face guy. He's always looking to bury players in the ground, but he's got to improve his balance. He's not that great on the second level. His footwork is a little bit tight. I can see the allure of him because of that Wisconsin system and the upside and the fact that he's a dominant power gap type blocker. I just think there's going to be more bumps in the road for him than there will be for John Michael Schmitz of Minnesota. And, with Aaron Rodgers there, the Jets need a guy to be ready week 1. They signed Connor McGovern. Wouldn't surprise me if Connor McGovern plays the first month of the season and then they try and ease Tippmann onto the field.
John, you were going through this thus far into round 2, the different positions that have been taken. This is our second interior offensive lineman taken in this round, second in the entire draft to this point. But this is a true center. How do you feel about this selection and for this team in the New York Jets?
Yeah, John Michael Schmidt's a tad higher, but I really like Joe Tippmann, and I was actually pretty surprised by how much I liked him. Like, he can move, and I think it's pretty exciting in terms of upside. I can't believe 6'6", 313 pounds, but he plays with such great bend. You know, you would think 6'6". First thing I thought was 6'6" as a center. Like, you're going to get pushed back a ton. Like, your guys are going to enter your pads. Plays with unbelievable flexibility, given the fact that he's 6'6". I mean, he doesn't look that way all the time. I remember watching Ethan Posick when he was coming out, and I was like, yeah, he looks like a 6'6" center trying to keep leverage. And I didn't see that with Tippmann. So hats off to him for that. I think he is still improving, but there is a lot to work with here in terms of him getting off the line of scrimmage, him a fighter, a scrapper, as Tony mentioned. Like, he is very physical, and not surprising at all to me that Joe Douglas was a fan of his. I think he's also got the mullet, or at least he had it at one point, that he's rocking as well. So this feels like a very natural fit to me in a lot of ways, schematically and also personality-wise. I think there could be bumps in the road in pass protection, especially if you're just throwing the ball more than you did at Wisconsin, less off play action than you did at Wisconsin. There's going to be a little bit more. And let's be real, in the NFL, it's such a big leap. So he'll have his work cut out for him.
Yeah, well, look, really good stuff, but we have to announce a pick. The Indianapolis Colts decided to make this pick. I guess they didn't want to trade it for the third time in a row. They decided to make this pick while on the clock with the 44th overall pick in the 2023 NFL Draft. The Indianapolis Colts select Julius Brents. Yes, Julius Brents is Tony. What should we know about this player, and was this a good fit for the Indianapolis Colts?
Well, it's a good fit because they have a desperate need at the cornerback position. I had other cornerbacks rated higher: DJ Turner, Keely Ringo, although I would agree with what John said. Keely Ringo, the reputation is better than reality when I watch the film. Darius Rush, who's a developing corner. Julius Brents looks the part. I mean, he's 6'2.5", he's 200 pounds, ran in the low 4.5s at the combine. He occasionally plays the part. Still very rough around the edges. Still very rough with his technique. Does a lot of face guarding. Too much face guarding for my liking. You go back to that Big 12 championship game where he really struggled with Quentin Johnston. But again, you know, the Indianapolis Colts, unlike the New York Jets, they're looking for players to develop 2 or 3 years down the road. And Julius Brents probably has as much upside potential as any of the second-tier cornerbacks in this year's draft. With the size, with the athleticism, with the flashes that he's shown, you just have to turn those flashes into consistent play.
John, not one of the corners I think that we were really anticipating to come off the board next, but alas, here we are. What are your thoughts on this selection?
I mean, 34-inch arm, 6'3", 198 pounds. His combine numbers are insane. A 6'6", three-cone at that size. I don't even think three-cone really matters for playing corner, but I'm just marveling at it. Like, it's just a really impressive result. It just didn't happen on the football field for him. Like, I mean, it just didn't. Like Tony said, like, there's all these traits. He looks the part. Probably no player I put on the tape and just wanted to like him more. Like, he physically competes. He just isn't very good at playing corner. And that, like, it sucks because you really want him to be good. But even the game against Quentin Johnston, people will go back and forth. Oh, he had a pass breakup and he had an interception. A terribly thrown fade route, you know, on that. And the other ball that he knocked away was also a terrible pass as well. He got lit up when it counted, when the ball was on the money. He got cooked, and Johnston, frankly, has some work to do too. And so I just felt like the tape was so underwhelming when I watched him. It was probably one of the most disappointing just because I really wanted him to be better than what he was. Having said that, there's a lot of character there. There's a lot of traits here to work with. This is very much a we can fix him type of pick, and we'll see if the Colts can do it.
All right, now the Green Bay Packers were supposed to be on the clock here making the 45th pick, but they've traded with division rival the Detroit Lions. Not something we typically see, an interdivision trade, at least early in the second round when these picks are really considered to be valuable. We'll see what the Lions do here with that 45th pick as we await for that pick to come in. I want to touch on something you said, John and Tony, about a player like a Julius Brents. We talk a lot about a player who is a list of attributes versus a football player, is it fair to say that Julius Brents has he is more of a list of attributes than he is a complete football player at this moment?
In my opinion, yes. I mean, people were talking about him as a potential late first round pick, early second round choice. I never saw it because, as John mentioned, you watch that Big 12 title game. He was terrible. Does a lot of face guarding. And when I do my scouting, when I see cornerbacks that are consistently face guarding, on the college cornerbacks that are consistently face guarding, that's a big red flag for me because you can't play in the receiver's hands. You got to get your head back around and track the pass in the air. Brent didn't do that enough for me. A lot of people love his upside. And remember, when you talk to teams, you talk to scouts, they want to know what a player can do well, that what he does well, so they can build upon that. And I guess they felt that Brent does enough things well that they can turn him into a starting corner.
All right. Well, the pick is in for the Detroit Lions. They are now on the clock at pick 45. They gave the Packers pick 48 and pick 159. And with the pick at 45, the Lions are selecting Brian Branch, who finally comes off the board. He is the safety from Alabama. Tony, he is the number one safety in this draft. A lot of people think that once he is selected, the gap between him and the rest of the safeties is pretty sizable. Thoughts on Brian Branch going at this pick and going to the Detroit Lions?
Are the Lions going to use him as a safety, or are they going to use him as a cornerback? Because some people have him as a slot corner. I personally love Brian Branch. Up until the combine when he ran the 4.58, I had him as a mid-first round choice. I thought the Jets could take him and use him as a free safety. He's got outstanding ball skills. He's got outstanding range. He is a tough run defender, but he goes to the combine and he runs 4.58. His position drills were outstanding, but the fact is, how early do you take a defensive back in the draft that runs 4.58? It'll be interesting to see if the Lions use him as a safety or they use him as sort of a nickel slot cornerback.
Yeah, I think the big question with Branch is just like what he's going to do in the NFL. And that's where I think everybody's like, oh, Brian Branch, first round grade, and they loved him. And I understand it. Like in college, good college player for sure. In the NFL, it gets trickier to figure out what you do with this guy because he played 25 snaps as a deep safety last season. Played 49 the year before.
Let me politely interrupt you just because the Patriots have quickly made their selection following up on the Lions selection of Brian Branch with the 46th pick of the 2023 NFL draft. The New England Patriots have selected Keon White, the edge player out of Georgia Tech. He's the 34th overall player on the PFN consensus big board. He comes in at 6'4", 267 pounds. Tony, will come to you first. Keon White was a player we thought might go maybe the end of round one. Definitely a top edge player to look at considering. Comes all the way down to pick 46 at the New England Patriots. Thoughts there for you?
I believe he's still in the green room there. He was one of the few players that decided to go because he thought he was going to go in the first round. I think this is great value for the New England Patriots. I think he's a good system fit. Again, more than just an edge player, a real athletic defensive end who does a solid job against the run. In that three-man front at New England, he's got excellent size, 6'3", 285 pounds. The problem with him is he hasn't played a lot of football lately because of injury. He was at Old Dominion. He transferred over, not too much up until last season, but he was very explosive. He showed signs of dominance last year at Georgia Tech, and then he played well at the Senior Bowl. But there's not a big body of work there. Has the upside or has the body to add weight to his frame, some growth potential. I think this is a terrific pick for the New England Patriots, especially where they got him.
John, we said it when Derek Hall and Isaiah Foskey came off the board. Was Keon White an edge player you had rated higher than them, but are the Patriots getting the better value here?
No, I had Keon White. Actually, he's the last rank for me of the DNs that are the edges that have been taken so far in this class. Now that's 11 in this class. And Adeboye, if you consider him an edge rusher, is still on the board here. So we are cruising through the edge rushers. It is wild. White is going to be 24 years old, already 24 years old, and has barely played the position. That's just the concerning part, like with him. There are traits there. There is great physicality there. He did show some stuff at the Senior Bowl, I thought. It needs a lot of development, a Patriots type of pick, I think, for sure. Maybe he can do a couple different things for you, but he feels like kind of a pure defensive end to me. And so his game will totally be dependent on how his hands develop in the NFL, because right now he's a bull in a china shop, and that can work for you in college with his traits. In the NFL, it's not going to work for you as much. So how he develops the hand usage, the pass rush move repertoire, that is going to be everything for him. If he can somehow do that at his age, it's going to be a home run pick for the Patriots because all the traits are there.
And let me tell you, I said he was 6'3", 285. He's actually 6'5", 281. So, he can easily put on another, 10 pounds or so. And we know he's got the athleticism. He shows it on film. Ran in the 4.7s during his pro day before he hurt his hamstring and had to shut it down.
All right, the Washington Commanders are currently on the clock with pick 47. They'll be followed up by the Detroit Lions, who are picking at 48, following a trade with the Green Bay Packers. They went and selected Luke Musgrave, if you recall, with that pick. And so then we have the Pittsburgh Steelers at 49. Before we get there, the Washington Commanders have made their selection at pick 47. They have selected Jartavius Martin, the cornerback. He is a highly rated corner, I think, for us, consensus-wise at PFN. Tony, what are your thoughts here on Martin coming off the board, continuing this defensive back? It's either defensive backs or the edges seem to be what we're seeing a lot of here.
No, I have Martin on my safety board. I wrote about him about 2 weeks before the draft that he was going to be drafted much earlier than people thought. I had a third-round grade on him. He goes in the second round. That's where a lot of people were talking about him going. Martin's an interesting story. He was ignored by scouts coming into the season. He wasn't even graded. Has a great year in that Illinois secondary that's, loaded with talent. We've already seen Devin Witherspoon come off the board. I think it's interesting that Jartavius Martin was selected before his teammate, Sidney Brown. He's got better size. He's got better speed. He's got as good speed, I should say. Incredibly athletic. We talked about the three-cone. I believe his three-cone time at the combine was insane. A guy who is a developing player. You want to call him a late bloomer, whatever you want to call him. He's got to prove that 2022 is not the exception to the rule. I think he's someone that you can use as a free safety. I think he's someone that you can line up over the slot receiver. He's not going to be a liability. Someone who just seems to be scratching the surface, Jartavius Martin. And again, wasn't even graded by scouts coming into the year, was ignored. And here he is, the second defensive back taken in, Illinois secondary, Fighting Illini secondary that was loaded with talent.
John, I want to get your thoughts on this, but before we do, there has been a trade. The Washington Commanders have traded their pick to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who are moving up from pick 50. That's right. The Buccaneers are moving up from pick 50. They are now on the clock at pick 47. While we wait for that pick, John, thoughts on Jartavius Martin going this early in the draft?
Wait, the Commanders took Martin, right?
Exactly. They did.
So they
made the trade with Detroit. Excuse me.
Oh, Detroit. Okay. All right. So the Bucs are on the clock at 48, so they move up. Martin, to me, is very interesting because there's not really any true safeties in this class. I kind of joked about it. We just have slot corners, but he did play a little bit deep, and they kind of moved him all over the place. He was outside corner some, mostly in the slot, 493 snaps there, and a really good player there, very physical and aggressive. Forced a lot of incompletions, was kind of always in the screen. Love when corners compete at that level. And so, yeah, 4 missed tackles this past season as well. Like, so, he can come up, play the run, he'll hit. I think there's a lot of traits there that are good. Like Tony said, I think he was just kind of off people's radar, it felt like. And all these safeties are pretty much slots. So it really is going to be very tricky to see. Does anybody actually play safety in the NFL, or are they all just nickel corners?
The safety position is something, as I was filling out some of these scouting reports, that I noted was quickly evolving and sort of losing value in the true sense of what we know as safety to be, but maybe gaining value in its positional versatility as the evolution continues. But real quick, just want to clarify kind of where we are. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock with pick 48. They have traded into this pick with the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers were picking at 48 because they traded down from the pick 45 when they gave that to Detroit Lions. So the Detroit Lions made the pick at 45. The Packers moved down to 48. At 48, they have now moved down again to pick 50, and it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the clock. The compensation in that trade, the Packers are getting pick 50 and 179, while the Buccaneers get pick 48. And with the 48th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are selecting offensive lineman Cody Mauch. I hope I pronounced his name correctly there. That AU always screws me up. Tony, I'm sure you'll correct me. What do you think about this selection?
Yeah, Cody Mauch of North Dakota State. You know, Tampa has had a lot of success with the small school offensive linemen through the years. I had a lot of great success with them developing these guys. There's a lot of love in certain areas of the scouting community for Mauch. Played left tackle at North Dakota State. Some people think his best position is going to be guard in the NFL. Some people think he's going to be a real good center at the NFL. He's just a real good offensive lineman. I think what's going to happen is the Bucs will move him into guard. You know, maybe they move him over to center as Jensen gets ready to retire. He's a guy who played very well at the Senior Bowl, played multiple positions on the offensive line at the Senior Bowl. And each day, he just seemed to improve. A real tough, fundamentally sound guy who has got a decent upside. I think this is a great franchise to go to when you consider their history of developing small school offensive linemen.
John, thoughts on this pick for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? You spent a lot of time the last couple of years covering this team. They've lost a lot of interior and exterior offensive linemen as the Brady era came to an end. Thoughts on this pick?
Yeah, not surprised at all that they're building this thing out through the trenches. That is exactly the way under Jason Light. They just give up a 6th rounder to do this. Makes complete sense. Make sure you get your guy. I don't even mind this over, somebody like Osiris Torrance, who I had ranked higher than Mauch, but I just really like Cody Mauch. Like it's moldable. They develop guys really well. For the teams that develop offensive linemen well, he was going to make more sense than some guys that are a little more pro ready like a Torrance. And so I think that this is a great fit. I pretty much trust Jason Light with offensive line over anybody out there. Now they've got a ton of options, right? It tackles the question mark, what they're going to do at right tackle. But it feels like with this move, that to me suggests Matt Filer is going to get a chance to play right tackle. And maybe last year's 2nd round pick, Luke Gadecki, who was back in college, will get to compete for that spot a little bit after he struggled at guard. We'll see what happens at that tackle spot if they add more competition. They've got Nick Leverett, who played well last year at guard. Jensen obviously will be back at center. Hainsey played center last year and was capable. He'll compete at a guard spot. Aaron Stinney is back from that season-ending injury as well. And now they obviously add Mauch to this. So a ton of options in the offensive line. They were going to figure this thing out in the trenches in terms of starting the next chapter of the Bucs. And I think so far, Jason Light has to be thrilled. I would bet these were two guys. I mean, Mauch to the Bucs was – everybody knows there's a love for small school guys, but it starts with physicality and athleticism and a mentality for how Light scouts offensive linemen, and that's been a pretty proven, successful track record for him so far.
Yeah, really, really interesting to see what the Bucs do here. Now it's the Pittsburgh Steelers on the clock at pick 49. Their pick is in. With the 49th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Pittsburgh Steelers are selecting Keanu Benton, who is a defensive lineman out of Wisconsin. Tony, thoughts on the Benton selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Well, they wanted a defensive lineman, and, as it was broadcast, Mike Tomlin was front and center at Senior Bowl practice all 3 days, and Keanu Benton was tremendous for 2 days of those Senior Bowl practices. I think it's a good fit for the way the Steelers use their defensive linemen, almost use the linebacker up at the line of scrimmage as a stand-up defensive end. Benton is a quick, explosive, more of a playmaker rather than a gap occupier. He's very active, fundamentally sound, uses his hands well, shows the ability to change direction. Better pass rusher, I believe, than he's given credit for. When you look at the needs the Steelers had, a lot of people thought they would want a defensive tackle in round 1. There was no defensive tackle there worth taking. They get Benton in round 2. I like the player. I like the pick. I think it's good value.
Okay. To be clear, the Green Bay Packers are now on the clock with pick 50. As we wait for that pick, John, your thoughts on the Benton selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
The Senior Bowl gives me hope because he looked better at the Senior Bowl, I thought, than he did on tape. And so maybe he's learning some things. The size is unbelievable. I mean, his frame is incredible. It just looks massive on tape. long arms and very powerful, put together well, hardly any bad weight. Unfortunately, to me, when I watched him, I just felt like he was really stiff as a mover, and the pad level was a real big concern to me. It didn't feel like he read or processed blocks very well. It felt like that he was falling behind on zone schemes pretty quickly and would be overtaken. It felt like there was a lot of inconsistency in how he won up front. It was basically like if he could get through a gap, good, but he was struggled at times to hold the point or to recognize doubles when they came. I think interior defensive line, although traits matter a lot, it's a cerebral and technique position first. Edge rusher, I give more, like that stuff matters, obviously, but I think that you can get by on traits out there a little bit more, especially if you have a move or two. But with interior defensive line, you've got to be able to hold up in a lot of situations. And I think technique and mental processing are really important. To me, there's a ways to go there, but the Senior Bowl was good, and he showed some pass rush moves and ability, and he played really hard there. I think he would run out of steam sometimes at Wisconsin. So I have hope. The Steelers are typically a team that doesn't really prioritize things like technical processing when they draft. They're very much of the raw, big, fast, talented player, and we'll turn them into something here because our culture's that good. So they, like they often do when they pick, are betting on themselves again with this pick. It wouldn't be what I would do, but rarely do the Steelers and I see eye to eye when it comes to the draft. So this pick would, of course, not be any different.
Well, I feel like a lot of people feel that way when different GMs are making selections. Speaking of GMs making selections, the Green Bay Packers have finally decided to make their pick after trading it a couple times. With the 50th pick of the 2023 NFL Draft, the Green Bay Packers have selected Jayden Reed, the wide receiver out of Michigan State. He will be close to home, I guess. Michigan to Wisconsin is not so far. Tony, still no Jalen Hyatt, but we have Jayden Reed, the wide receiver to Green Bay. What are your thoughts here?
Hooker either. That's a story in the making. You know, you say the Packers finally made their pick. Well, the Packers finally selected a wide receiver, haven't they? And you know, Jayden Reed is another guy who was terrific at the Senior Bowl, had 3 outstanding days of practice, was also a real good receiver at Michigan State for 2 years for a Michigan State offense that really struggled last year. Very consistent, fundamentally sound, not the biggest bodied receiver. So, you know, you want to get him in open space. Great eye-hand coordination, sneaky speed, shows the ability to get down the field. Also is going to help you out as a return specialist. I mean, he was a good punt returner at Michigan State, so he adds that element of, being a receiver as well as a return specialist.
John, thoughts on the pick?
Yeah, interesting because everybody likes him, but nobody wanted to grade him high. It's really funny. Like everybody throughout the process, oh, he's so good at the Senior Bowl. Like, oh, he's so good at this, but nobody wanted to give him a high grade. It felt like everybody kind of thought he'd go day 3, and there he is. The Packers just said, no, he's polished. He's a good route runner. He understands leverage and routes, and there's zero upside here, but we're going to take him because we got some upside guys and Dubs and Watson obviously on the team already. So I think the fit is good. I had other receivers ranked higher, but I think the fit is good and it makes sense to me.
Well, look, as we said, the Packers, their last 2 picks have been offensive players. So we'll see what they do here. Now, the Miami Dolphins did not have a first-round selection because they got caught cheating as they were tampering with Tom Brady, something that Tony Pauline broke for us a year prior to anyone even knowing about it here at Pro Football Network. Well, that has come home to roost as finally the Dolphins are making their first selection of the draft with the 51st pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. The Miami Dolphins are selecting Cam Smith, cornerback out of South Carolina. A really interesting pick. He comes in at 6 feet tall, 185 pounds. Tony, they make the trade for Jalen Ramsey. They have Xavier Howard. They move on from Byron Jones. Is this just a gluttony of riches here? What do you think about Cam Smith to the Dolphins?
Major risk. I mean, great guy's got great upside. He also has a lot of downside potential. He was someone who was projected as a first-round choice early in the process. And then little by little, when you watch the film, we talked about Julius Brents doing a lot of face guarding, not getting his head back around. That was a problem for Cam Smith. A lot of character issues. He was a very pouty player at South Carolina. He was the kind of guy that would storm off the field to practice when things weren't going his way. So, very high maintenance type of character. He's a great athlete. I mean, 6 foot 1/2 inch, ran a 4.43. He's physical. He's got good size. He flashes the ball skills, but he needs a lot of work on his mechanics. And from what I've been told, he's got to really mature and grow up as a person.
John, what are your thoughts on this pick for the Miami Dolphins with Cam Smith?
It's a real scheme diverse player. I liked him. He definitely competes on tape. I could see the fire that Tony's talking about coming out in a lot of different ways for sure. I didn't see anything that was great to me. Like I just saw him. I said, "This is a solid player." Like he did a lot of different things for them. They tried to play him in the slot more this past year. I didn't think he was better there. I didn't think that was natural for him. I thought that actually did some things to hurt his stock. The Tennessee game was just kind of, what are you doing with this guy? Like I know Jalen Hyatt's fast, but he was playing like 20 yards off Hyatt in the slot. And he was retreating at the snap. So he's giving up tons of underneath. Just the schematics and what he was asked to do didn't make much sense. I think he was put in some frustrating situations last year and didn't play his best football because of it. The year before there was more on tape, but I didn't really see the traits that he tested really well. I didn't really see those traits come out on tape that often. So good, solid player, interesting fit. I mean, obviously with Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey here and a bunch of corners who did pretty well last year, Kohau in the slot. And you obviously have Needham here as well, been a good backup. And then Igbenogany, this is going to be probably a make it or break it year for him. So how he factors into the room or if he really plays early on, especially for a team that feels like they're in a win now window, there's not a clear path to that playing time, I think. So curious pick in that regard, but I he was the best corner on the board left for me. I can't speak to the character stuff Tony talks about, but I think in terms of talent, this is a really good value pick.
Well, look, it's strange to me. The value is there for sure, but Chris Greer continues to be a mystery to me. He's kept his job. Right? Yeah, I continues to keep his job through 2 decades of it doesn't matter. Okay. We are waiting for the Seattle Seahawks to make their pick at number 52. Once they do, we will bring that to you. But because of how fast this has been moving, haven't had a chance to give a shout out to all the audience members watching us so far. So big thank you to you. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel while you're watching us here on YouTube. Also, make sure you get your notifications every time we upload new content. You can check that out by just clicking that little bell icon that you see there. I'm going to give a couple shout outs here from Vortex. He put this comment in a little over an hour ago. He said, "When I see John, I click." All right, John, thank you for bringing
Vortex.
Some of these people here. We got some JC Allen with Jon Ledyard love as well. Not only does he give you the heart emoji, but in his next comment, he really makes a comment about your physique. With traps like those, the Steelers might draft John here at 32. You weren't the pick. But your traps are pretty nice. Got some Tony love as well. Rob Staten wants to give a shout out to Tony Pauline, the best in the business. Hope you're enjoying the draft. And Bob Smith recently chimed in about the Cody Mauch selection. He says, "Mauch missing those front teeth immediately makes me trust the pick more." Yes, we are with you. That is true as well. All of that said, the Seattle Seahawks pick is in, and the third running back of the 2023 NFL draft has been selected, because with the 52nd pick of the 2023 NFL draft, the Seattle Seahawks have selected Zach Charbonnet, the running back out of UCLA. Tony, this was a running back that I think a lot of people were high on, thought could go pretty high. He is the first running back selected in the second round and the third running back selected overall. Quickly give us your thoughts on that.
I love this pick. I love this player, I should say. I mean, Zach Charbonnet he plays with a violent style. I mean, he is just a nasty ball carrier. He runs downhill, but he's also got some terrific short area quickness. He's consistently keeping the play in bounds. He runs through tackles. He runs over defenders, but he also shows the ability to run around opponents. And he's a terrific pass catcher out of the backfield. I think, when we talked earlier about the running back position being devalued, I think that's what the situation is with Charbonnet. Probably should have gone earlier. In Seattle, they need a little bit of help on their interior offensive line. And I think that they were debating whether it was going to be Charbonnet or John Michael Schmidt of Minnesota, who they really like. I really like this player a lot. I can't talk enough about him.
All right, John, let's come to you. The Zach Charbonnet pick, he's a good player, good value. But to me, this is exactly like what the Dolphins just did with Cam Smith. The Seahawks have Kenneth Walker in their backfield. He was an offensive rookie of the year candidate for much of the year last year. Again, what do you think they're doing here? What's the mindset?
This is crazy. Like, I don't understand this pick at all. Like, what? I mean, Charbonnet's a good player. Like Tony said, I really like him. He's my next ranked running back. He's a very good, I mean, he's physical, he's aggressive, he's smart. They rave about him at UCLA, character and all those. I mean, he is the guy in terms of the personality you want to draft. But this is the least valuable position on the field. And you already have an offensive rookie of the year candidate in Kenneth Walker's. They AJ Dilloned it. That's what they did here, Brett. They just straight up AJ Dilloned it and just doubled it to running back with all these other needs that they have. And I get that some of the position groups have had like edge and defensive tackle have had some decent runs on them here, but this was not what I would have hoped for if I were a Seahawks fan. Having said that, he will be a very good number 2 running back to Kenneth Walker, I guess. That offense has a lot of talent. Let's put it that way.
It's just a strange 2 picks. For me, John, it's the same exact thinking that I was, speechless and stumbling over my words with Chris Greer. Not only are you not probably addressing a player of need, a position of need, which again, you don't really want to draft for need, right? Anytime you can take best player available, you want to do that. And you look for ways where best player available is going to meet up with a position of need, and you have that marriage. There were players at positions of need available with good value for the Seattle Seahawks to take here. Have no idea why they want to now limit the reps that a Kenneth Walker is now going to get in their backfield, which to me, again, is exactly the issue with Miami taking Cam Smith. You have Xavier Howard, you have Jalen Ramsey, both on mega contracts. You're not going to limit their reps, which means your first pick of the draft, even if it's a second rounder, he's not going to get the reps to develop the way he needs to. Neither of these picks make sense to me. Oh, and
I understand what you said. He is a terrific player, so it'll be interesting to see what they do. Maybe they don't think Kenneth Walker's going to be there for the long haul. Maybe they're concerned it's going to be a one and done. But Charbonnet's terrific. It'll be interesting to see now they have 2 outstanding backs to rotate the ball to.
Yeah, that's the thing. And yeah, not a shot at the players at all. It's really just about the fit. The players are good, just not sure that these are the teams that they're going to have the best ability to thrive on. That said, the Chicago Bears have made a pick with the 53rd pick of the 2023 NFL Draft. The Chicago Bears are selecting Gervon Dexter or Gervon Dexter, depending on how you pronounce it. And I'm sure I'll learn the hard way because someone will correct me. That being said, Tony, thoughts on this selection for the Chicago Bears making this pick for the NFC North?
Guy who played really well at times last year for the Florida Gators, someone who's got immense upside, 6'5.5", 318 pounds, ran in the mid to high 4.8s at the combine. He plays that athleticism on the field. He shows himself to be a one-man wrecking crew on occasion on that Gator defensive line, was able to manhandle opponents, moves around the field very well, shows a closing burst, still very rough around the edges, still very raw, needs to really refine his game. I had him as a late second, early third round choice. So we are in the late second round, and again, the Bears need help on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and they're building for the future. I like this selection because I like the upside of Dexter.
John, thoughts on the pick?
And he really needs to learn how to play defensive tackle, but if he can do that, I think he will be okay. Like, there is pad level processing, lack of pass rush skill here that is noteworthy when I watch him. Just thinking this is a very, very raw player. Now, the physical traits are unbelievable. On the hoof, I mean, this is the guy, right? 6'6", 310 pounds. Arms came in way shorter than people thought, way shorter than I thought even watching it. It wasn't something I noted just because he's so big in general. You don't think to look maybe, but ran a great 4-yard dash and the jumps were good. And to run a 7.53 cone at his size, I mean, absolutely, it's good stuff. So the traits are there for sure, but every pass rush rep basically is just 2 hands pushing into the shoulder pads of his opponent with no real plan of attack after that. So he needs really good coaching and development, and I think Chicago is hoping that they're the place to give it to him. I'm sure he's going to remind some of the towers that they've had in Indianapolis. Certainly, he'll remind some people of Buckner, but he's just so much more raw than Buckner is. But I think if they can do that, it's possible, but we're going to say that a lot over the next day. And the reality is most of the development for these guys won't happen in the NFL like it should, but definitely seems like that this was the traits pick of the defensive tackles because he also has the size. Whereas somebody like Adebawore, you're like, okay, he's 280 pounds. Where do I play him? Can he hold up inside on a full-time basis? And with Dexter, that's not your question. More your question is, if he can't give me juice on passing downs, is he an early down defensive tackle? And can he ever be more than that? And I think he could be, but learning to play with a better pad level is going to be really key for him.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens here. The Los Angeles Chargers, by the way, are on the clock. Their pick is not in. When it is, we will let you know. We do have a comment that came in. I believe it's Gaelic Islander from 835. I believe this is sort of a question or comment about my sort of statement about what the Seahawks did. And thus the Dolphins as well. We can throw that comment up on the screen. It says, do draft for need, don't draft for need. Which one is it? There's some wondering if I have ever thought about a two-back rotation because injuries have been horrendous for the Seahawks running backs the last half decade. Yeah, really good points. I mean, first, it's not about do or don't draft for need. The goal is to draft for need with the best player available. You're hoping is that the best player available is at a position of need. And the way that a lot of teams do their draft boards, it's a sort of a horizontal draft board where there are similarly rated players and you take the one that's rated at a position of need there. And I want to continue on this, but before I do, the Chargers, there's a trade. The Kansas City Chiefs seem to have traded into this pick.
I think they might have traded into 55.
Say that one more time to me, John.
I think they might have traded into 55 where the Lions are. I think the Chargers made their pick, and it's Tuiapolotu.
Okay, so the Chargers have made the pick at 54. Okay, and they have made that pick, and it is for Tuiapolo, the defensive I'm going to let you guys say that name. He is the defensive end out of USC. Tony, take it away on this fit for the Chargers. Once you do, and John, you get your say, we're then going to let you know because it appears that the Kansas City Chiefs have traded with the Detroit Lions to make the pick at 55. Go ahead, Tony, on the pick.
You got to wonder if that Chiefs selection, if the Chiefs move up for Jalen Hyatt, who I was told that they like. Now, getting back to Tuiapolotu, had a terrific year. Very explosive player, very nasty player. He's quick, he's agile, terrific pass rusher. Was be used on the outside, used on the inside. A little bit small though, 6'3", 266 pounds. Never timed in the 40. It never really worked out. Didn't work out the combine. Didn't work out or didn't run the 40 at the USC Pro Day. He had a hamstring injury. If you remember, I was posting pictures from the USC Pro Day, and it was basically there was a flood there. It was underwater. It'll be interesting to see how the Chargers use him. Are they going to use him at defensive end? Are they going to stand him over tackle? I don't think he's a defensive end in a three-man front. He plays like that. I mean, he plays strong football, but he's just not the biggest guy in the world. Someone who at one point in time they thought he could fit into the end of round one. I thought that was a little bit rich, but and then came the combine measurements. Just a real good football player, though. It's going to be interesting to see how the Chargers line him up.
John, thoughts on the pick?
Yeah, I think pass rush athleticism. I always talk about the 4 pillars of pass rush athleticism. People who followed my work for a while have heard me talk about this before, but I think burst off the ball, speed, continue to sustain that burst as you're moving up the arc, change of direction, ability to cross face and come back inside if you need to, or to be able to throw a jab step, win outside, create space for yourself, and then obviously bend and flexibility as well. I like Tuiapolotu. I just don't think that he has really those traits. And so if you're not a true edge rusher, he's listed at 290 pounds in college. He was 266 at the combine. That's crazy. I don't know what happened there. He definitely looks bigger on his tape than that weight is. Where is he going to play is exactly the question, as Tony said, because right now he looks like he should be a situational interior pass rusher, but doesn't have the size to play there full time. And I don't know that he has the traits to play on the edge.
All right. Well, look, the Kansas City Chiefs, as we mentioned, traded into pick 55 with the Detroit Lions. I will bring you that compensation in a moment, but their pick is in. They are selecting wide receiver Rashee Rice. That is their pick here at the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of people suspected they might be looking for a tackle. We've tried to tell everybody all along, we tend to be a little connected to the Kansas City Chiefs, that they were very happy with Juwan Taylor at left tackle and are all in on Lucas Niang at right tackle. They have spent their first 2 picks on positions of need, edge rusher and wide receiver. Tony, thoughts on Rashee Rice being the next wide receiver off the board to Kansas City?
Yeah, had a knockout campaign last year at SMU. Really was the go-to guy after, the graduation of some very talented receivers. Showed himself as a good downfield threat, was able to win out in battles, for the most part, fundamentally sound. There were a lot of off-the-field issues with Rashee Rice that bothered some teams, and it was going to be interesting to see where he landed. I had him as a 5th-round pick. There were some teams that took him off the board because of the off-the-field issues. He also has what's called a sesamoid injury in his foot. I guess the Chiefs are okay with it all. I mean, they needed a receiver. I thought this pick may have been Jalen Hyatt. When you compare Rashee Rice to Jalen Hyatt, he's not the same downfield threat. He probably has a little bit more of an expanded route tree, catches the ball real well. I like his eye-hand coordination. I'm not a big-body guy, more of an intermediate sort of route runner, intermediate receiver. He's a good pass catcher. I guess the character concerns were not a problem for the Chiefs. Now he moves into a situation with Patrick Mahomes. I'm sure they'll help him grow up and help him keep his focus on the field.
Yep. John, before you give your take, I just want to go over what the compensation was. The Lions have moved down to pick 63, which is where the Chiefs were supposed to pick, which was the last pick of round 2. So they go to pick 63. They also get pick 122 and 249 from the Chiefs, who in addition to getting pick 55 will get pick 194. And of course, with pick 55, they've selected wide receiver Rashee Rice out of SMU. And one more thing, John, before we talk about that selection, the Bears are now on the clock at 56. They have traded into that pick, and they have made that trade with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So the Jacksonville Jaguars have moved down to 56. The Bears are now on the clock. When their pick comes in, we will bring that to you as soon as we have it. But for now, John, what are your thoughts on Rashee Rice going to the Kansas City Chiefs, which they much needed a wide receiver to help Patrick Mahomes out?
Yeah, I mean, this is a totally different type of receiver than the Chiefs are normally connected to, right? They're connected to Zay Flowers pre-draft, obviously Tyreek Hill and McCole Hardman and all these speedsters, right? Justin Watson can fly, all these guys that they have. It's speed, it's speed, it's speed. Rice is not very fast, and he's not a great athlete. And so you kind of start from there. However, he is good in the air. He can jump, and he had great ball skills. Actually had a little bit of Brandon Lloyd vibes when I watched him. I felt like now he's pretty raw. Like he needs to get better as a route runner. I don't know if the separation ability is there. I worry about the athleticism. I really am surprised by that pick. I did not have him in one of my next couple wide receivers. And I think I know he's a slot only for a lot of teams, but someone is going to get a really good player in Josh Downs. I am just a huge fan of his game. I know that he can probably only play inside and that he's small, but the ball skills at his size, I really think there's a good player in there. And he's just a great route runner, quickness, speed. I think he's going to be a steal for somebody. Maybe it wasn't the type that the Chiefs felt like they needed, but I'm a little bit surprised that Rice went that high.
Tony, I recall Rashee Rice being someone you reported earlier on of Football Insiders as sliding down draft boards. Could he have gone higher if not for some of those issues?
Well, I mean, it depends. He performed well at the Senior Bowl, but as John was alluding to, he didn't test well at the Combine. Now, whether it's because he's not a good athlete or whether it's because, there's that sesamoid injury that I talk about in the foot, I guess the Chiefs were okay with everything, and they were just going to, throw caution to the wind and go with him. He is a solid pass catcher, and like I said, SMU lost a lot of talented receivers off the 2021 season. Rice comes in and really was the man of the day for SMU. Couldn't be stopped, so there's got to be something said to it. I agree with John. This is a questionable pick. You talk about Josh Downs, Cedric Tillman is still on the board. There are a lot of good receivers available.
All right. Now, I do have an update on the compensation between the Jaguars and Bears that puts the Bears on the clock here at 56. And with that 56th pick, the Chicago Bears have selected Tyreek Stevenson. So with the 56th overall pick of the 2023 NFL Draft, Tyreek Stevenson is the pick for the Chicago Bears. They make that pick at 56. To get to 56, they traded with the Jacksonville Jaguars. They gave the Jaguars pick 61 and pick 135. In exchange for that, the Bears got 56, in which they used to select Tyreek Stevenson. Tony, thoughts on Stevenson to the Chicago Bears?
Well, the Jags get another 5th-round pick. What's that, about 22 picks in the 5th round that the Jags
I believe the 5th round is now called
the entire 5th round.
I was going to say.
As far as Tyreek Stevenson is concerned, I mean, he's been a good player since his days back at Georgia. Then he transferred to Miami. He's long, he's fluid, he's very quick. I think he needs to polish his technique a little bit, needs to play with a little more balance. If Tyreek Stevenson is able to consistently play at the high level that he shows on occasion, he could be a starting cornerback in the NFL. There's no doubt about it. He's got the athleticism. He's got the size. He's got the physicality. I've also seen good instincts from Tyreek Stevenson, but I've also seen a lot of inconsistency. I've seen a guy who's very haphazard in his movement at times. He's slipping around. He's just got to bottle it all up and play at a very high level on every snap basis.
Yeah, he really gets after at the line of scrimmage. I mean, press coverage, like, he is smooth and he is very patient, I would say, in press coverage. After that, I have questions. The lack of acceleration for him, I think, is an issue. Like, the receivers can create separation because he isn't a quick accelerator, isn't super instinctive, isn't good at anticipating that next movement. Sometimes can lead to some of the slipping and being off balance and things that Tony's talking about. I think in zone, he had a lot of potential, but sometimes it felt like there were miscommunications in their secondary, and I'm not sure. I don't think he was like blowing the coverage, and I think he was just executing something. And then the safety one didn't seem like they were always on the same page. That UNC game, there were a lot of coverage busts and a lot of issues in that game. He wasn't maybe fully healthy in that game too, and one to watch for him for sure. Interesting pick because the Bears look like their corner room looks like they could all play linebacker if they needed to, like Kyler Gordon, Jalen Johnson, and now this pick. They're all pretty big, thick, like safety-like looking corners. And this is Kyler Gordon didn't have a great rookie year, and I really liked him coming out. And we'll see if this is say, hey, well, you got to step it up this year, and because you got a little pressure behind you, because obviously Johnson's on one side and Vildor's in the slot. So now they feel like they're probably 4 deep at corner.
Well, we talked about this corners. That's sort of been a big position that's come off the board. There are 2 out there that have not come off the board yet. I want to get your thoughts on this. And by the way, the other thing I want to get your thoughts on never mind. Excuse me. The New York Giants have made their selection. Again, this is not a surprise. John Michael Schmitz, the center from Minnesota, is the pick. He's the 33rd overall pick on the PFN consensus big board. He comes in at 6'4", 320 pounds, and he goes to the New York Giants. Tony, again, a few weeks ago on Football Insiders, when we talked about Tippmann and John Michael Schmitz as the 2 centers, we said both New York teams were desperate to take centers in this draft. The Jets went and got Tippmann. The Giants now select John Michael Schmitz. What are your thoughts on this selection?
I did 3 mock drafts this year because I don't like doing mock drafts. And each of the 3 mock drafts, I had John Michael Schmitz going to the New York Giants in the 1st round. So I had the player right. I was just a round off. I think this is a great pick for the Giants. I mean, John Michael Schmitz is definitely a New York Giants type of center. He's smart. He's tough. He's fundamentally sound. He's not great in any area of the position, but he's real good in every aspect of it. He shows great vision. He does a great job leading the offensive line. The Giants made a lot of investments in players like Daniel Jones. They franchised Saquon Barkley. There's a gaping hole there at center. I think, as I said earlier, when compared to Joe Tippmann, John Michael Schmitz is probably more NFL ready. He's probably the guy that's going to start more sooner after Labor Day weekend for a team, and I think he's going to be a consistent player. Very happy to see this pick. Joe Schoen yesterday said that after Zay Flowers and Deontay Banks, they had a 2nd tier of highly rated players at non-premium positions that they were going to consider. If neither of those guys were there, I'm sure John Michael Schmitz would have been in the conversation for the 1st round if they had not made that trade for Deontay Banks. I like this pick a lot.
Yeah, this is a really good pick, and it's fun too because now we got the Jets and the Giants in the battle to see which one of the centers is better for the next decade or whatever, or however long their careers last. Which will be fun because these guys were pretty, depending on whose board you looked at, one was over the other, and it was very close, and most people liked both of them. And so I like this pick a lot. I think he's a really good player, and I just love what the Giants are doing. He'll start right away. Deontay Banks in the first round was a great pick. I think Joe Schoen is proving to be one of the best GMs in the NFL. I am just a huge fan of pretty much everything the Giants have done since the regime change there.
We got to love what they've done. And Tony, I just got to give you kudos, man, because for a bunch of times on Football Insiders, you correctly picked out all of these scenarios that are playing out in front of us during the NFL draft based on your reporting. So kudos to you. By the way, the Cowboys have made their selection. They are taking another tight end off the board at pick 58 with the 58th pick in the 2023 NFL draft. The Dallas Cowboys are taking Luke Schoonmaker, the tight end. Tony, what are your thoughts on this pick? And then I want to talk to you guys also just to get it in your minds. A bunch of players are still on the board like Osiris Torrance. I want to get to him in a moment, but Tony, first, tell me about Luke Schoonmaker.
I thought that the Cowboys may look towards Darnell Washington with this pick, but I guess with Schoonmaker, who's a little bit faster, who's a little bit more of a downfield threat, a little bit more like Dalton Schultz, the player that they lost in free agency. That's the way they went. Schoonmaker's been a very solid tight end for Michigan the past 2.5 years. He's a consistent pass catcher, not a true downfield threat, not going to beat the linebackers in a foot race down the field, but he's got excellent length at 6'5.5", 251 pounds, moves well around the field, very consistent hands. I mean, catches the ball like a receiver. I like his eye-hand coordination. He's also a smart guy, works well with the quarterback to come back and find the open spot in the field. You know, again, he's not a streaky down the field type of tight end, although he'll sneak it downfield on occasion. Just very consistent, not a great blocker, but it's not because of lack of effort. He's got a taller, thinner body. I think that this is, they wanted Dalton Kincaid in the first round. That's why the Bills moved ahead of him. I think this is a good option for the Cowboys to fill the hole at tight end.
Yeah,
John, you mentioned Musgrave before being not one of your highly rated tight ends. Was Schoonmaker higher than him?
Schoonmaker was actually lower than him, but I didn't get a chance to really watch him as much as I would have liked to pre-draft. But blocking is if blocking is what you want, you definitely prefer and take Schoonmaker in this situation. The real curious part about this is Darnell Washington not being the pick yet. I mean, that surprised people. Albert Breer tweeted right before the second round started that the medical concerns the teams had with Darnell Washington were pushing him down the board. I don't know anything about that, but that was just his report. And so something to keep an eye on there as to maybe why he hasn't been drafted. Tucker Kraft is the other tight end I think you'd expect. But you mentioned the consensus board and just the top players left that are still not been selected. And Osiris Torrance from Florida is the top player so far.
We had a comment from one of our viewers I'd like to get up on the screen. This is from a Caden Erickson. And they ask, why is Osiris Torrance falling to this point?
If I'm going to guess, I think it's because teams are a little bit wary of the lack of athleticism and movement skills from him. I think teams just see a guy who will be a pillar in pass protection, but won't necessarily be somebody who is that flexible and able to keep up with quicker speed rushers on the interior.
John, I can tell you one team that apparently doesn't have those concerns because the Buffalo Bills have just made a selection and they are selecting Osiris Torrance out of Florida.
Look at that.
So he does come off the board. We might be plugged in directly to the NFL. Who knows? But let's talk about it because we just were about to. Didn't go as high as we expected him to go, but he has gone nonetheless. Tony, how do you like this as a fit for the Buffalo Bills?
I mean, I liked Osiris Torrance. I wasn't in love with him like a lot of people were. I mean, he's a big body guy. He's strong. I think he's more of a power gap blocker than he is a zone blocker. I think he's a good addition for the Bills this late in the second round who wanted some interior offensive line help. Why did he fall? I'm just told that the body type, he looked kind of flabby during pro day. Those pro days, a lot of times the guys don't wear shirts. And he was kind of hanging all over the place, which means he's going to need work he's going to need time in the NFL weight room. He played in Florida, but don't forget, he came from Louisiana Lafayette, and he came to Florida with his coach, Billy Napier. He's got a good amount of upside. He's just got to really, I believe, just form that body, become stronger, although he plays strong, and this could be a real steal for the Bills.
Yeah, he's got to
John,
lean into his strengths. Like if Osiris Torrance is going to be all that he can be in the NFL, like Tony said, like he plays strong, but you got to dominate people. If that's going to be your game, physically dominate people. Michael Onwenu, I think, fell in the draft for similar reasons. People just didn't think that he had the movement skills. They thought the quicker guys would cross him up and he would be in trouble in those regards. But he was just so good with his hands and so powerful and deadly with his punch that it just hasn't mattered. And that's why big reason why I was so high on him. I think with Osiris Torrance, teams wonder if they're getting Damian Lewis again, who's a solid player for Seattle, but I don't think he's like all that his traits suggest that he can be. And if you're going to be great as Osiris Torrance, you need to be able to displace people on a regular basis, and you need to crush people with your punch and pass protection because you don't have the lateral movement skills. So keep yourself from having to play that way.
All right, and the Bengals have made their pick following the Bills' pick of Osiris Torrance, and it is the Bengals selecting the other player I wanted to bring up as someone who has slid far, and they are selecting defensive back DJ Turner. Tony, quickly tell us your thoughts on this pick. I know you like him as a great slot corner in this draft. How do you think he fits in Cincinnati?
Yeah, this was a guy that they liked and they considered in the first round, and I think that they're very surprised, excuse me, that he's still here in the second round. I've been a big fan of DJ Turner for the past 3 years. I think he's got excellent ball skills, goes and runs 4.26 at the combine. One of the things about Turner is sometimes it was tough to scout him. And it was tough to scout him because teams weren't, the opposing quarterbacks were not throwing in his direction. They were throwing to the other cornerback because Turner was such a good corner. Terrific ball skills. We talked about Julius Brents not being able to get his head back around and track the pass in the air. It's not a problem for DJ Turner, who does it all the time. He's a smaller guy, under 6 foot tall, under 180 pounds. So like, as you said, more of a slot corner, but teams need those nickel corners with so many offenses lining up receivers in the slot. I think this is a really, really good pick for the Bengals. I think they went with value with Miles Murphy in the first round. I think they got value here, and they feel the need a cornerback.
All right, John, before you give us your thoughts on the pick, we do have to say goodbye to Tony. Tony, as always, it has been an honor to spend 6 hours of the NFL draft between last night and tonight with you. Not only do the NFL draft fans, should they be thankful for everything you bring to the table with your unique and exclusive reporting, your information, and your top-notch draft analysis, but I know Pro Football Network would not be where it is without everything you have brought to the table. And it has been a true privilege for me and an honor and educational experience to get to work with you. So hopefully we'll get to do this again next year. But if not, I have truly enjoyed the time, my friend, and we'll see you soon.
Means a lot, Brett. John, take it the rest of the way, brother.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for being on with us. This is a lot of fun. Getting to this Turner pick, this is a really solid. I mean, this is the best corner left on the board, in my opinion. The Bengals really needed to do a little bit more here, I felt like, at the corner position. And they've done that, and they've added another pass rusher, too. So this really, I do like this part of it. And I think that this can be, who's going to play the nickel? What do they do with Mike Hilton? That's going to be a question mark here. Like, is he the early downs guy, and is Turner the later downs nickel? Does he play outside? There's some questions to work out, but a lot of talent in the cornerback room now.
All right. Now, as we are waiting for some of these other picks, the Jaguars are on the clock with pick 61. I do want to bring in NFL draft analyst for Pro Football Network, Ian Cummings. Ian Cummings is going to join us through the rest of the second round. Ian, you're looking a little sleepy, my friend, but you are awake. It's been a long night for you. In addition to joining us on the live stream last night, I know you've been crushing an incredible amount of editorial content for ProFootballNetwork.com. Any of you guys watching the show right now need to head over there and make sure you're reading Ian's work. You will be better for it. Ian, we're waiting for the Jaguars to make their pick at 61. But we did just see the Bills take Osiris Torrance and the Bengals take DJ Turner. Thoughts on those picks from you?
Yeah, DJ Turner, I'll go with him first. I think the Bengals obviously looking in the future, kind of like they did with Daxton Hill, right? Getting that safety in there because you're going to have turnover later on, and now he's going to be in a starting role this year. They got Mike Hilton and Chidobe Awuzie. I think they're going to be scheduled for free agency soon here, so it's one of those things where DJ Turner can play the boundary or the slot, either one, but the recovery speed is elite, man. I didn't expect him to be at the board at this pick, but I think that elite trait is something that he can build around. It's so valuable to his game. He's physical. He plays beyond his frame, I think. think, and he's got playmaking ability, like Tony said. Big fan of that one. And then I actually mocked Torrance to the Bills in the mock, the round 2-3 mock earlier today. But he's a guy who, in a phone booth, right, that strength and power can be menacing, can be overwhelming for you. He's a little heavy-footed, right? So like I don't think he's supernatural getting out into space. But at this point, getting a guy with that dominating frame, it's a good value pick, and especially for the Bills, who need to be more combative, they need to be stronger in the trenches. I think it's a good value move for them.
All right. Are you surprised that it took excuse me, before I can continue, the pick is in from the Jacksonville Jaguars. They are selecting Brenton Strange. Brenton Strange. John, thoughts on this pick for the Jacksonville Jaguars here at pick 61?
Tight ends are going, but it's not necessarily the ones we expected, and so pretty intriguing.
I'm not even going to ask you where this one's ranked because I feel like I'm setting these guys up to get criticized here. But the picks,
they're all good. Like, no, I mean, I think all these guys are in this range. Like, I'm totally like Shoemaker. I totally get it, especially if Washington has health concerns. I'm curious the story with Kraft, because I did think the thing with Kraft on tape, he just doesn't run any real routes. Like, it's like, what is he? Always run to space off play action, that kind of stuff. So where's the translatable skill? But I think the traits are there. And so if you're just going to go traits, Brenton Strange makes a lot of sense. I mean, he's a good athlete. He can certainly get open and separate. Like, he is a move tight end type. They ask him to run block some. I don't think that's his forte or will be his forte in the NFL, but I guess I just didn't think it would be this high because the other tight ends above him were just projected to go there, which would push him down the board. But I don't actually think it's that bad of a pick. And if you look, they have Evan Ingram, right? Like, if they continue to build out that model of tight end and they're trying to stack that type, okay, this makes sense as a backup. Sometimes what teams will do is try to build like a basketball team, right? And complementary skill sets at tight end. And they have not done that here. So they are buying all into the move tight end, the manufactured touch tight end that we can get the ball to and they can produce offense for us. So I like this. The strategy is interesting. I'll be real curious if this works.
Ian, Brenton Strange, I got to imagine, is not a player that you ranked highly inside of your tight end rankings, but I could be wrong. What are your thoughts on this selection in the second round for the Jacksonville Jaguars?
Yeah, it's a little high for me, but I think, as draft analysts, you always need to be flexible, right? Every team's board is going to be different. Some teams going to have guys higher, right? So it's not
Great
something
point.
you can't scoff at any pick, right? Because they have reasoning for it. And I think, John mentioned a good point, getting that move tight end, kind of having different player types in your rotation and complementing each other can be very valuable. And Brent Strange in particular, he has a very dense, compact frame. He's got great contact balance after the catch, getting the ball in space, and he can churn through contact. I do think that's something that Kraft provides as well. Kraft tested very well. He's a smooth athlete in space. I think he's a very good blocker too. So I'm intrigued to see why he's not getting picked yet, Tucker Kraft, but I do think there is reasoning for it. Brenton Strange is a solid athlete. That contact balance, that rack element is something that can be very valuable, especially with all the vertical threats that Jaguars offense has. I think there's a nice tug effect for them there.
And John, you touched on this a little bit with Evan Ingram. They do have him on the franchise tag. Does a selection like this make it possible that he's on the move, or that even if or that a long-term extension maybe isn't in the cards and they are eyeing him as a replacement for Ingram?
I think more the second one. It just makes it an option, I think. You always want options as teams, right? And if Strange develops, okay, it's an easy chance for us not to spend money on this position, and we can spend it on wide receiver or corner or one of these other premium positions. And so it's just giving yourself an option. And if, Ingram proves to have an unbelievable season, then I don't feel like you think you're too big of a deal to have another one of these guys, a tight end, another move piece. So I understand the process there, and it gives them a little bit of leverage in the situation if he develops.
All right. We were waiting for the Eagles to make pick 62, but there has been a trade. The Houston Texans, who have been extremely active in the trade game, are trading up. They are now making the pick at 62. And with the 62nd pick in the 2023 NFL draft, they are selecting Juice Scruggs, who has immediately been inducted into the Football Name Hall of Fame with that name. Wow, Juice Scruggs has been drafted to the Houston Texans. John, we'll start with you. Give me your thoughts on that selection for Houston.
Back-to-back Penn Staters. Brenton Strange was the furthest down the consensus board of any player that's been selected so far. 137 overall there. I believe Scruggs is lower now, 174 overall on the consensus board. So these are two. We have not seen hardly any big reaches. Before this, Schoonmaker was the furthest down the consensus board, and he was the 100th overall player on the consensus board. So that wasn't even that big of a reach. These two are big reaches per the consensus board. Juice Scruggs, Penn State, center, gets after it for sure. I don't know that we even had much reporting that he was moving up like this. I think PFF might like him more than any other site that I've seen from him. But I mean, one thing that you'll say about him, he has the size like that you want at the position. His arms over 33 inches for a center, great stuff. And if he can continue to develop his skill, especially in being a zone scheme guy, I think that will be the key for him. But it feels like it could be a really good fit with him. Let's say that.
Yeah, and especially having those 33-inch arms at around 6'3", 300, this is a guy who has that natural leverage and proportional length, right? So he can get under opponents easier, also make contact, drive power with that length. At the Shrine Bowl, he was a distinct standout. He was one guy who in one-on-ones, in team drills, he's intelligent, he's got experience at guard and center, and I think that's valuable, but he'll probably play center for the Texans. But he had a 32-inch vertical, right? So he's actually a better athlete than he gets credit for. He's got really good lateral mobility, covering those gaps in the middle of the field. I think he's honestly one of the more underrated players. In this range, we didn't know which centers were going to go first. You've heard Luke Weipler, maybe Ricky Stromberg, but there was some room for variance. And I think Scruggs has the experience, the physical tools, like you said, to be a surprise here. And I think he's one guy who we could look back and maybe the valuations should have been a little bit higher for him.
Three centers.
Well, go ahead.
I was just going to say 3 centers in second round.
Yeah. And make that 4 or 5 interior linemen as well.
Yeah. And Mock could be a center too.
So so look, we are just coming up on the last pick. The Lions were going to pick at 63. Remember, the Chiefs traded up to 55 to make that selection. The Lions went down to 63. The Lions have since traded that pick to the Denver Broncos. So the Denver Broncos are on the on the clock with pick number 63, which will be the final pick of round 2. And unfortunately, the final pick of our live stream here tonight. Want to thank you all for watching with us. We're going to bring that to you. But before we go, obviously make sure you like and subscribe to this channel. Click the bell notification to make sure that you get updated for any additional content that we upload. And big thank you to everybody here. We're still here. We're gonna go with you through the pick. We're gonna get some final round 2 analysis before we head out. So don't go anywhere. But always nice to say a big thank you to everyone watching. Okay, the Broncos moving up to 63 means they got to think there's someone that they got to get that's not going to be available to them with their 3rd round pick. I have the compensation on this, guys. Denver's getting 63 and 183 from Detroit, and Detroit is moving down to 68. Okay, so it's a 3-pick move. 5-pick move. I promise I did go to school and learn basic math. Can't say I struggled with it a little bit. It's a 5-pick move. What do we think here, John? What do we think the Broncos are moving up here for?
Maybe a quarterback, since they don't have one. I'm just kidding. Let's see. What's the best players on the board?
Cook, John.
Yeah.
One name that stands out to me is maybe Cedric Tillman. I know there's been a lot of trade talk around Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy, so maybe one of them is going to be on the move in the future. Tillman is pretty high on my board, 6'3", 215. Some people have comped him to Sutton. I comp him to Michael Pittman Jr., streamlined athlete, actually better route nuance than he gets credit for. Could be the pick here. We'll see, though.
Yeah, wide receiver feels like the pick to me, just because all the rumor they're going to move one of these guys.
It is wide receiver.
And it is.
Marvin Mims.
Yeah, so Marvin Mims comes off the board of the Broncos there. They got the route runner that they wanted.
Yeah.
All right, with the 63rd pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Denver Broncos have selected Marvin Mims, wide receiver. Okay, so John, you said you called him the route runner that they needed. Elaborate a little bit. Tell us a bit about Marvin Mims.
I think just kind of similar in some ways to Jaden Reed. It just feels like you know what you're getting with some of these guys, and maybe teams are leaning on that. They want guys that they know they can play. Just the body control, and I feel like his ability to vary speed at times to create separation, I think really big pluses for him. I think that the size and play strength is a concern with so many of these guys across the board in this class that it's saying it over and over again feels repetitive, but that will be kind of the big question for him. Like, is he strong enough? Does he have the size to be able to get off press coverage? Is he going to end up being just a slot or a guy you have to work free off the line of scrimmage into his routes or avoid certain matchups? So that's just the class. Like, the class is full of those guys. So it's not like they're passing on guy other than Tillman, who Ian talked about. And I think that's a good point. Like, he is the highest ranked receiver left for me as well. And so I am a little surprised he continues to be passed, but it's a type, right? If you're not going for that type, then it makes sense why you would pass on him and go for somebody like Mims.
Where was Mims ranked for you, Ian? What do you like about him?
Yeah, he was just inside my top 100. I do think, it's interesting. It's a fine balance to strike because I think that Oklahoma offense didn't always showcase his full route tree. I do think he still has room to refine it, but he's one of those guys, like John said, you look for, can he use stride variations? He's explosive, but can he use those stride variations to manipulate spacing? And I think he's shown that he can do that. He can veer into blind spots and kind of manipulate defensive backs. But the thing that gives me confidence with him, beyond the speed, beyond the explosiveness, he's one of the most instinctive wide receivers at the catch point when it comes to getting in the correct positioning, using body control to flow to the ball, and then extending beyond his frame and securing the passes with his hands. I think he's very, very consistent when it comes to that. And I think that's going to be a security blanket for him at the next level. I do think he needs to refine his game a little bit more, but the tools are there for sure.
All right, that was the final pick of the second round. Before we sign off here, I'd like to get each of your thoughts. John, what was, for you, what stands out to you about this second round of the NFL draft? Anything big? What's your big takeaway?
We criticized the Lions a lot yesterday, and I felt like rightfully so. Although I think they got two solid players, they just reached and didn't really manage the board well with premier assets in a win now window, or they think would be a win now window. I felt like those were important picks that they squandered a little bit in terms of value. But I love Sam Laporta. He's my number 2 tight end in the class. I felt like they nailed that pick, and I was a surprising one to me that he went as high as he did. But I mean, it was on my board. It made complete sense. So I love that pick, and I think what he brings to that offense, another weapon. I love continuing to build weapons around Jared Goff there. And then to come back and get Brian Branch at 45, yeah, there's some question about what exactly he'll be in the NFL and where exactly he'll provide the most value. But I do trust Detroit to figure that out. And they need more adults in the secondary, I think, this season. They've added a lot of good players and good talent to that room. How they make it all work with some of these interchangeable pieces, there's a chance with some of the personnel the Lions have, Branch will play a little bit more deep down the field, or perhaps he is the nickel. And some of the other pieces they've added, like CGJ and Tracy Walker coming back, they're going to be your deep safety. So they have a lot of pieces. They have way more flexibility and way more ways to approach coverage. And I think that is a huge win for them coming out of this round.
Ian, biggest takeaway for you for this round 2?
Yeah, it's hard to get a takeaway. I feel like a lot of teams are banking on upside here, which is usually what you see in round 2 and day 2. Teams, this is where the board really spreads out across the league, where preferences really come into account. Some of my favorite fits, I think Derek Hall at the Seahawks was one that I really liked. I think his speed to power profile, one of the best in the class. I mean, you're looking at 6'3" with almost 35-inch arms, a guy who's very explosive off the line, twitchy, can offset guys and drive into their torso. Liked that one a lot. Matthew Bergeron to the Falcons. Again, upside, but you're really banking on the ceiling because he's a phenomenal athlete, very rangy as a run blocker, insanely powerful with that frame. There's more Rashee Rice to the Chiefs. I love the upside there, the 3-level threat that he provides with his run after catch ability. If he can stay healthy, the foot injury kind of sapped his explosiveness a little bit this past year, but another very instinctive, explosive weapon with that high end contact balance after the catch. So I think upside is a big theme for me. Teams are starting to kind of bank on who they want. They're starting to hone in on their guys, which can be risky, right? But it can be rewarding too. And, I'm excited to see what round 3 brings, because I think as we get farther and farther down the board, that variance is only going to increase.
All right. I want to give a big thank you to everyone who's watching and for who watched us all of last night and watched us all of tonight. Our live stream is going to end here, but the NFL draft continues, and so does Pro Football Network's coverage. For anything revolving around round 3 through round 7, Pro Football Network has you covered, whether that's Ian Cummings, Dalton Miller, or the rest of the great analysts here at Pro Football Network. You can get everything you need for this 2023 NFL Draft from ProFootballNetwork.com, including our best-in-class mock draft simulator. So make sure you go check that all out now. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe to this channel. Big thank you to Jon Ledyard for joining us here at Pro Football Network, to Ian Cummings making time to hop on, and of course, a huge thank you to the legend, Tony Pauline, for whom without Pro Football Network would not be here today. So big thank you to him as well. I am Brett Yarris. Remember, everything you need for pro football is at Pro Football Network. Go there now.